We've got a big-time Fight Night card coming up this weekend, headlined by Aspinall taking on Tybura. The return to London, 15 total fights to break down. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. And just like that, we're back with Fight Night Picks. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. Twitter and Instagram, at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials. The biggest Austin Reeves fan. I mean, previous to him, maybe Alex Caruso with the Lakers gear. Matt Allen, respective socials, at Matt Allen FNP.
I don't only like the white players on the Lakers, just to make that abundantly clear.
Big Jerry West guy. We've got some big fights coming up this weekend. On the heels of a good weekend for the brothers, going 10-3, but 15 total fights, and usually when they throw that many out there, it's not necessary that they all stay by the end of the week, but a lot of fights to break down. Tom Aspinall back at it again. You saw him last summer, the knee injury, torn meniscus, torn MCL, damaged ACL when he took on Curtis Blades. He now gets to take on Marcin Tybura, and for Tybura, no stranger to a UFC main event, though it's been a while. 2017 decision loss to Fabricio Verdum, the former champ. So both guys looking for a win there at heavyweight. Molly McCann taking on Yulia Stoliarenko in the co-main event. 4 total UFC debuts on this card, 6 sophomore showings in fighters' second time out with the promotion. So a lot to look forward to. A few different weight class changes on this card as well that you want to make sure that you note. But a lot of UK action on this card.
And it feels like we have a lot of potential changing of the guard type of matchups, because in a lot of these you have the one way more recognizable name, and then you have the fighter sort of on the come up trying to get their recognition off of that big opponent. And I think those are always the fights that make for the most fun, because it's going to be an established vet that a lot of UFC fans are going to know a lot about, like a Paul Craig or an Andrea Muniz, and this could be interesting, right? A matchup like that is at 185. Hopefully Paul Craig can show us something new, but there's a lot of fights on this card that I really do think are going to be in competition for that fight of the night slot at the end of the week.
A lot of really good opportunities. This weekend, I'm away to see the Jays, so I will be in and around on Saturday. We'll figure out a way to get question mark kicks out to you, and then after that, we'll figure out the schedule from there. How about that one? Travel, it is happening the end of July into August, but make sure you keep it locked in here on the YouTube channel, the podcasts out there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get those audio podcasts. You can always find us at Fight Night Picks as well. So a lot of action to cover. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Flyweights are on fire in 2023, and with a recently crowned a new champ, it's Alessandro Pantoja. The fact you have big-time prospects making their debuts like last weekend, Azat Maxim going 17-0 out of Kazakhstan coming up this weekend. A little bit of fresh flavor. We have the rookie out of Spain, Daniel Barez, and he's going to be taking on Pastor Jafel Filho. And listen, even though Mr. Pastor Filho out of Nova União, he may have lost his UFC debut. He took that one against Muhammad Mokaev back in London's 02. Filho had the craziest non-submission submission that I've ever seen locked in with the knee bar against Mokaev in the second round.
Goodness.
Only to then lose by submission himself in the third. So Filho looking to level up, looking to get that first UFC win. And both of these men came in off a contender series. For Jafel Filho, an awesome fight against Roybert Echeverria. And now this time against Daniel Barez, who lost on 2021's Dana White's contender series against Carlos Hernandez. It was a split decision loss, but Barez looked great in the first round. Kind of tailed off a little bit in the second, kind of pulled guard, looked for a submission early in the second round, and after that, it was all Hernandez. But if you look at Daniel Barez since 4 wins in a row, and all 4 of them by finish against a paltry level of competition, and I can break them down in great detail, but when you go back and you watch Daniel Barez tape, it very much is a clash of styles. He likes to get it done with the jiu-jitsu. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt training out of Entram Gym down in Mexico for this fight. But Barez, man, getting it done with the hands, loves to dig the left hook to the body. You saw him go to that well in one of his recent finishes time and time again. But out of those 4 fights, I counted 8 knockdowns in his last 4 fights since he's left the UFC. And Daniel Barez, he knocks you down, and then if he's able to get the finish, whether it's with his ground and pound or his submissions, he's very, very special against the black belt in Jafel Filho.
And you know what I really like about Barez? His aggressiveness does help him blend his own striking along with some of his grappling, because he really does like the left hand, not only in the left hook to the body, he likes the jab to the head too. He does have a very snappy jab when he is throwing it, but that's the thing for Barez. In the fights where he's having a lot of success, the jab normally is a very big key to his whole arsenal, but if he's kind of getting away from it and just sort of throwing feints from the outside and not really allow his jab to set up the rest of his game, it does really hinder the rest of him. I always go back to that quote that Chael Sonnen said about Michael Bisping. He goes, okay, when the UFC tells you you're going to fight Michael Bisping, you're a little worried, right? Like, he's really good at everything. He's got great cardio. So you kind of have to break it down bit by bit. And for Chael, he figured out that Michael Bisping set everything up with the jab. And he goes, okay, if I get rid of the jab, we don't really have to worry about all the other kind of scarier stuff that he's able to do. For Barez, it's not as essential to his game because, like you bring up, he is much more likely to go to the ground. And the thing about Barez, too, is he's got a great right hand, and it snaps quite well when he is able to throw it. There's not a lot of extra fat on it, and with his forward approach, I think he's going to make for a really interesting fight against Filho, who we do bring up quite a bit. He does get off to a bit of a slow start, especially on the feet. He'll be a little bit hesitant. Now, if you go back to that Echeverria fight, just watch the third round, because once he is able to get those training wheels off, and he is able to get into second and third gear, he does show a lot of very promising skills, and you bring it up, I'm very glad you did. The knee bar that he almost had against Makhachev, lesser men would not only have tapped, they would probably never be walking the same way afterwards. So for Filho, I really hope that people do just look at his last performance and kind of discount all the positives that come along with it, because yes, he lost by submission, but he is an extremely talented grappler himself, and you only have to go back and watch his regional fights to kind of remember that.
And I mean, you look at it for Filho, 13 of his 14 wins by finish, and you consider it, he is a practicing passer, so very interesting to mix those two, martial arts and an almighty higher power. If you do look at it for Jafel Filho, I mean, you consider his last matchup, you look at the fact that last weekend, he was supposed to take on Juan Camilo Ronderos. On June 27th, Team Iridium announced that Daniel Barez had been signed into the UFC, and then on that same day, it was a big Marcel tweet. It's like a Woj bomb, a big Marcel tweet about a fight booking. Barez taking on Filho. So somewhat a short notice. Barez as well, and I'll throw it up there, training a little bit at Tiger Muay Thai for this one. So interesting there, getting some of that cardio work in, getting some of that sparring going. But again, going back through those performances, as I said, he's won 4 in a row. He had a lengthy layoff from his pro career, building his way up. We know he had that loss to Manel Kopp years ago, a loss to Mikhail Siklander, who we talk about all the time, it seems. He's on everybody's record.
A lot of recognizable names on his resume.
But for Barez, a really tidy run, loses to Hernandez, who's 2-1 in the UFC and looked amazing against Dennis Bondar recently. And then Barez with these 4 wins. The level of competition coming on to Dana White's Contender Series. Combined opponent record 44-19. The last 4 wins 37-39-1. His last time out he took on 14-12 Solenis Carvalho, the former UWC champ. And again, it was the strikes to the body. It was 1, 2, 3 leg kicks at the start of that fight that dropped him. He ends up getting it down to the mat. He ends up getting the finish, but it's his hands to get it down to the mat, not really his offensive wrestling. His fight at Naciones MMA 3, the same card as Edgar Chaida's. Barez's main training partner for Chaida's last short notice camp against Taira, but as well for Barez's fight here. In that one, he took on an opponent that looked like a little atomweight, little Hernandez, and he was a very, very small man. Barez walks him down. It's that left hook to the body. He dropped him 3 times in that matchup before he ends up getting the TKO due to ground and pound. So again, the strikes of Barez has been highlighted. For Jafel Filho, you saw it against Echeverria. It's that check left hook. It's the fact that he will throw out some kicks and mix them in there. He's heavy on his lead leg, and he doesn't check his own. Like, he doesn't check leg kicks at all. He tries to grab at a lot of his opponent's leg kicks, then get the takedown. It scares me in certain matchups, but Filho is one of those guys. Novo Nhau, you've seen the pictures with Jose Aldo. He can get it done with a striking as well. We look at this matchup, Matt. It's a coin flip as far as the odds are concerned.
Which is understandable.
I'm really eager to see where the Tapology votes are, because we talked a lot about Barez, but man, you got to give Filho his props.
100%.
I'm going to say that they're probably pretty close, and I'm going to say over-under. I think the fans are going to go Filho. 60% Filho over-under.
I think they'll be over.
I think they're going to be over. Oh my lord.
I didn't think they were going to be that one-sided.
676 total votes, 88% Filho, 29% by decision, a large proportion, 58% by submission for the 12% that have Barez, 41% by knockout. And if you only watch these two guys on Contender Series, you think, man, Filho's a striker, and Barez, he struggles with some of his takedowns. So who do you have in the pick in this one?
I do have Filho. I do feel like his game complements itself a little bit more, if that makes any sense. We have seen the grappling from him definitely in the past, and I like the submission ability. I don't think Barez is going to be able to go in there and just have his way with his own aggressiveness. I don't think he's going to be the one who's going to dictate, okay, the fight's on the feet or the fight's on the mat, because I do think the BJJ of Filho is enough of a threat to where he's going to be really hesitant about taking it to the mat. So for those reasons, I've got Jafel in the matchup.
I have Daniel Barez in the fight. I really do like the striking and the fact that he likes to go to the body a lot, whether it's with the kicks, whether it's with those left hooks. And I mean, when he goes left down and then he throws his right hand up there, that right cross is very, very zippy. So watch out for that. Split on the pick in this one. I have Spain's Barez, Mac going with Brazil's Jafel Filho. Some big time fights in this card, including the heavyweight marquee, the return of Tom Aspinall taking on Poland's Marcin Tybura. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. And a welcome to the UFC, to the lone representative of the Republic of Ireland on this weekend's card. Coming up, it is the Invicta star, the undefeated Mama B, Shauna Bannon, training out of one of Matt's favorite Irish MMA gyms. It's not SBG Ireland, Holohan Martial Arts.
It's really like the fit NHB of Ireland, isn't it?
It really is. But Patty bringing it to the big stage once more. And for Shauna Bannon taking this UFC debut against Dana White's Contender Series 2022's own Bruna, Brazil, former soccer player. In her debut, didn't make out all that well against D. Gomes. Turns out D. Gomes has cinder blocks.
She's a pretty good fighter, turns out.
In her hands. But if you look at a matchup like this, Matt, I mean, the things that jump off the page about both these two fighters. Bruna Brazil, southpaw, tricky sidewinder, chopper type hand. She keeps them really low.
Like The Undertaker in 2002. He's rolling.
I don't think he walked out to Limp Bizkit.
He did. Actually, The Undertaker at WrestleMania walked out to Limp Bizkit live.
That's hard.
It is pretty hard.
For Bruna Brazil, though, really low hands. And we touched on that in her debut against D. Gomes, only for her to absorb a big right hand. She falls down like a sack of potatoes.
And it changed the whole fight, didn't it?
Yeah, and that was the beginning of the end for Brazil. And if you saw her fight against Marc McMahon on Contender Series or any of her regional tape, it was a lot of head kicks. That's how she was able to win that fight. It was a lot of body work. She's a fighter who really accentuates her striking, but also has good jiu-jitsu. Out of the fighting nerds is Bruna Brazil, gym headlined by Caio Borralho. So a lot of really good skills. It's just mixing the martial arts for her, whereas for Shauna Bannon, boy, was it ever an interesting time going back and watching the tape. And it's very easy to find, whether it's Cage Legacy over on YouTube, whether it's Invicta as well. For Shauna Bannon, her last time out, took on the former two-time atomweight Invicta title challenger, the old stink bomb, Mina Grusander. And in that one, Shauna Bannon, whether it was with her submissions, with her striking, really piecing all of her game together. And again, doing the research, she did an interview with the Craig. Did I pronounce it the right way, the way those Irish folks say it? With Pete Carroll. And she said, and I quote, "I've had 5 very good fights. I've kind of went through every avenue in each of my fights in my professional career. Grappling, wrestling, striking. I've overcome adversity in all of them, and I believe now I'm ready to get in the UFC." Man, has she ever. And she really does mix it all together. Shauna Bannon, though, the biggest thing that jumps off the page for her, 5-time WAKO world champ in kickboxing. And that's where the bread gets buttered when Bannon is striking from southpaw. It's the body kick, it's the kick to the head and the leg kick from orthodox. She likes to throw the front, like the push kick, but she'll also kind of go power stance like a guitar player and then throw her punches. If I could have any comp for Shauna Bannon, who has good triangles, good things off her back when she's on the ground, really good top pressure too, she fights just like Michelle Waterson-Gomez.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good comp, honestly. The lightness on their feet is very representative in both their styles, because Bannon's not someone who's going to really sit down and crack you with a lot of those shots. Yes, they are good strikes. The body kick is something that was open a lot in that Grusander fight, but she's not going to hit you to the body like what's the best body kick I can think of? Like Luke Rockhold, for instance, right? Remember Luke Rockhold kicked Costa Philippou, one of the great Michael Bisping lines? But still, Bannon does have all of those skills, and she really is able to demonstrate it in a lot of these matchups. My curiosity comes down to, is she going to have enough power on the feet to really get Brazil's respect? Because if she is at kicking range, which probably isn't the greatest idea in this matchup, because I do think Bannon has more to offer than just those kicks at distance. From southpaw, and you bring it up too, she's just very a left leg heavy kicker. She does like the front kick from the orthodox position, a power kind of roundhouse kick to the body and to the head from the southpaw position. But for Bannon, I'm going to be curious to see if A, the pressure can start to eliminate some of the kicks up Brazil, and if she's going to have confidence in her own kicking game. Because the one thing I'll say about that Crusader fight that I didn't enjoy, the commentary could call out exactly what was going to happen before it would happen against Crusader. They'd be like, Mina's got her hands really high, I wonder if she's going to kick to the body, and Bannon would just immediately kick to the body. That was not a good version of Mina Crusader, that's just all I'm going to say. She's lost the last 4 fights, I'm not going to say that there's some great hidden away version of her. All I'm saying is, Bannon, I think, looked maybe a little bit better than she might in the UFC in her debut in that match.
And again, for her to say to Pete Carroll, listen, I've overcome adversity in my fights, I've utilized all my skill sets, that was on great effect when she fought Nadia Vieira over with Invicta, and it was a lot of the takedowns. Vieira was in a dominant position, but again, like, Bannon from her back, she'll get that leg up there, she'll grab it, and then she's going for triangle. She's really trying to go for some crazy stuff. So, if you do look at Bannon, the champ over the Cage Legacy, the rematches that she was able to have, or the 2 fights out there, similar opponent, but against a 1-2 fighter, and it did look like a big skill gap in those fights. For Bruna Brazil, one of the things that we kind of said coming into the debut was the takedown defense isn't the greatest. It'll set up a little bit of her jiu-jitsu, but it is a little bit troubling out there. Again, when she is throwing those kicks, when she is pressuring forward, Brazil has a lot of success, but she can look to time a lot of the counters when she's on the back foot, and if it doesn't happen, she backs up with her head straight up, there's no pullback on the counter, and then all of a sudden it's middle of the cage, behind the black line, up against the cage, and she can really struggle getting held in some of those positions.
Exactly, and that's why for Brazil it is an interesting case study, because at the things she does well, she is really good at them, but if she's fighting a fighter who does have that threat of wrestling, and even for D. Gomes, like, Gomes is sort of a smaller fighter in stature, right? She's going to throw those big hooks. She was able to close that distance and really eliminate a lot of the offense of Brazil, and once she was able to land on her offensively, Brazil just didn't really have that second and third note to her game, so I'll be really interested to see if Brazil isn't having that success on the feet. Her jiu-jitsu is good, but I will be curious to see just the grappling level of both these ladies. See if we will get ultimately a submission win, because I do think grappling is going to be an essential part of this fight. I don't think we're just going to get 50 minutes of strict kickboxing, even though their styles might suggest that that's what we're going to get.
I mean, Brazil, former Brazilian and South American kickboxing champ to go along with that. So if you do have a look at the odds in the matchup, Brazil is favored in this one. A little bit less than she was against D. Gomes. And don't forget, she was favored to beat D. Gomes going into that fight. We both had.
Gotta watch out for D. Gomes, I tell you.
Bruna Brazil to win that fight. Matt, we have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprise to us there, or to you. I'm going to say over under 65% Bruna Brazil.
I think they'll be under, but she'll be the favorite.
They are the opposite. 710 total votes, 65% Bannon, 85% by decision for the 35% that have Bruna Brazil, 78% by decision. Matt, that doesn't surprise me at all. These two women against each other, I think it would go to a decision.
So do I, and that's why I have Bannon in the matchup. I feel like a lot of today, I was going to go with Brazil, but the more I thought about it, the fact that Bannon does throw A, the body kick, I think that is going to be open for her, and B, will throw boxing combinations after. I do think that's going to be very key, because if she stands at distance, that's Bruna Brazil's world, but if she can start to close that distance, you bring it up, the hands of Brazil are quite low, and I do think Bannon's going to be able to land some of her own offensive strikes to really get the respect of Brazil as this fight continues.
I think Bannon's going to get the win as well. I don't necessarily love it because Bannon's striking defense to me isn't the greatest out there in the world. I mean, again, she has a great lineage in kickboxing. They both do. But for Bannon, it's the well-roundedness that I like in a matchup like this. So both of us going with, it's not Dolly Parton in the picture, Ireland's own Shauna Bannon to get the win. You let us know who you have down below in the comments section. Next fight on the docket. It's the return of the Mac. Yanal Ashmouz taking on Chris Duncan. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
And it's the second time out for Scotland's The Problem and Chris Duncan as well. It's the second time out for Red Fox, Yanal Ashmouz. And listen, Yanal Ashmouz ran so Chris Duncan could walk. And the last time that these two guys fought, their respective UFC debuts were at UFC 286. Ashmouz knocks out Sam Patterson. And then Chris Duncan has a terrible fight against Omar Morales as the follow-up. It was the next fight. Matt, we had a lot to say about Yanal Ashmouz before his UFC debut, taking on Sam Patterson, because we didn't know what to think about him and we weren't all that positive on him. So let's throw it on over to a clip before that Ashmouz debut. When you look at it for Yanal Ashmouz, and it's spelled Ashmoz by the UFC and Topology and Sherdog, but on Yanal's own Instagram page and the way that PFL spelled it, there's a U in his last name. So my apologies if that ends up getting changed throughout the week. And yes, we know his first name, what it rhymes with, flannel. It's Yanal. But if you look at it for Yanal Ashmouz, I mean, the guy's 6-0, and he's put on some really impressive performances. And if you consider it, the last 3 fights are with more major organizations. Third to last fight with Ring of Combat, he takes on Armando Getasia. His last time out, he was taking on Dennis Hughes over with the PFL, and before that, took on Ryan Rizko over at CFFC. I've seen Yanal look, labored in some of these fights, but he always wins. I've seen him throw wild looping hooks, because that's going to be the big kind of story of this week. Yanal's billed as 5'9", and Sam Patterson 6'3".
He's huge.
But Yanal almost looks smaller than that, so I'm really eager to see what we get out of these two guys, because Yanal's forearms, he looks like Dan Ugla for the fish.
Shout out.
The Florida Marlins, or I guess, his time that he spent with the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, that's who I think of.
But when you look at both of these guys, Matt, Yanal's so good at kind of closing distance, throwing those wild shots, and then landing head kicks. His hips must be so darn flexible. I think this is going to be a fight that not a lot of people focus on, but for two hungry guys making their respective UFC debuts, it could be a lot of fun.
It should be a really fun fight, but my problem is the way that Yanal fights is going to open up a lot of the grappling for a guy like Patterson.
We'll see in this matchup against Ashmouz, because he trains at a K-Warrior Dojo Tribe, or K-Dojo Warrior Tribe, which is the gym that Khabib Nurmagomedov settled with when he came to the States, and then he moved to AKA. But you've seen Alexander Yakovlev out of that gym. You've seen Azamat Murzakanov out of that gym. A lot of Ovs in the last names of folks training at that gym in Fairfield, New Jersey. So an interesting move there for him. But I went down through all of these Yanal Ashmouz fights that you can find out there, and they're very readily available. You go through it, pro turn back in 2017. First 3 fights as a pro are over in Israel. And then you see those 2 over with KNO. So his fight against Yona Kohana, I've never seen a more disgusting guillotine choke in my life. That guy picks him up in the air and chokes the lights out of him. So a big win there. He beats Abdallah in the second round. He beat Getasia in the third round. They have that as a second round win. In the fight against Abdallah, he gets beat for pretty much all of that fight. And then he lands a really big shot and knocks him out.
But he does have that power. That's the thing that we do have to, give him credit for. Because he can fall back in these fights, but he carries power late. He has that one-shot ability. Because that's the thing. I don't want us to get overlooked by his technical or deficiencies, I guess.
In his fight against Getasia, he struggles with the takedowns. He struggles with the striking. He struggles with everything. And then that was the one. It was in the third round. Getasia just kind of lets his hands go down just a little bit. Yanal's throwing wild for the fences. Yanal lands one shot with this side, and then he lands this wild overhand left, and Getasia, like a sack of potatoes, hits the ground. And then in Yanal's fight against Ryan Rizko, Rizko's rinse and repeat with the takedowns, beats him in the first round, beats him in the second round, beating him in the third round, and then in the third round, that's where he ends up getting the finish. So you look at that one. I mean, Yanal is a finisher. I know all the wins until the Dennis Hughes fight are by finish. Hughes was taking him down a little bit in the start, and then Ashmouz was able to defend some of those takedowns, work his own striking. Ashmouz was a pretty big favorite at the start of that fight, about a 3-1. He gets the win, but the weirdest part about it is he's going to be a year to the day removed from his last win over with the PFL, and it's weird. You don't see a lot of PFL Challenger Series fighters end up in the UFC. In December, it was late December, was when Ashmouz signed with the UFC, and now he's matched up in this one against Patterson. Ashmouz could clip Patterson, and I don't say that as it could happen, but it probably won't. It could, because Sam Patterson can struggle, just waiting and waiting, and he's susceptible to getting hit. He's gotten hit big and clean in some of these other fights. But he typically tends to struggle with takedown defense, and I don't know if Ashmouz is going to incorporate that offensively in his game. So for me, I do like Sam Patterson, the straight shots to get through, for him to be able to pick his power shots. He does a really good job of landing.
If he does look good, maybe we don't learn a lot just based on where Yanal is in his own career, but I do think Patterson is favored to win this fight for a good reason.
Matt, both of us going with the future. Ian Machado, Gary, no. Macy Barber, no. Sam Patterson.
It's an overused nickname.
Gotta pick a new nickname. Think of the best slam dunk you've ever seen in NBA history.
I've got it.
And times it by a million. Yanal Ashmouz, overhand right, and as Sam Patterson's falling like a tree, hits him with a left hook. And I went back and watched it a couple of times today, but when I put that one on a board with some of the most disgusting UFC knockouts of all time, you think like Gabriel Gonzaga against Krokop, you think Edson Barboza against Terry Edom, or Rich Franklin when he knocked out Nate Corey and just absolutely corked him.
The Chuck Liddell one's bad,
and
too.
He went cold. So for Yanal Ashmouz, disgusting knockout win over Sam Patterson, the Englishman. And now all of a sudden, Yanal Ashmouz, he's all the hotness. And for Chris Duncan, he's a really weird fighter to be in the UFC. He's 30 years old. He fought twice on Contender Series. First fight, competitive against one Slava Borshev until he gets knocked out. And then his next time out, UFC credits Charlie Campbell with 0 knockdowns. I credit Charlie Campbell with 3 knockdowns. And then Chris Duncan rallies back, knocks out Charlie Campbell. He goes up and fights Omar Morales, who switched gyms. Decided, you know what? I don't need to be MMA Masters anymore. It's KO Zone and it's the Goat Shed. There's a fighter on this card that did the exact same thing in Daniel Marcos. But for Chris Duncan, puts on the wrestling shoes, struggles in some of the striking exchanges, and wins a controversial split decision.
What I will say about Duncan, though, is go back to the Slava fight. We did see a lot more of the wrestling in that matchup, too, and that's the thing. When Duncan is firing on all cylinders, he's not just the guy who is very right-hand heavy, and that's the thing about Duncan. On his second Contender Series matchup against Campbell, that's one of the great one-round fights of all time. It truly is. He gets cracked by some massive shots. Whether they're knockdowns or not, the man is hurt very, very badly, but the result he was able to show by ultimately landing that right hand, it was insane, because he gets hurt, kind of gets knocked down, whatever you want to call it.
It's a Raggedy Andy.
Exactly. Goes down, gets up, and the next punch that man throws knocks out his opponent. So for Duncan, when everything is working, he does have very good power. He has shown the ability to knock out opponents. I do like his wrestling, not at the level of a Khabib or a Michael Chandler, but the fact that he is able to work it in and do it at such a high work rate as well is a really impressive thing. And for Yanal Ashmouz, before we get too carried away with the positives, he's a guy who was taking it down quite a bit on his way up to the UFC, and I'm going to be the first one to admit it. I was wrong about Yanal Ashmouz. I thought Sam Patterson was going to win that fight, and I felt quite strongly that he was going to win that matchup. But what I loved about Yanal in that matchup was his ability to close the distance with his feet. He can go from across the cage to in your face in half a second, like he's some kind of a wide receiver running a 4-2. So for Ashmouz, I was very wrong about him on his way into the UFC, but what he was able to show to me in that Sam Patterson fight is very easy to at least eliminate some of the negatives I had.
Well, there was a reason why I wanted to stop you there, because you talk about Chris Duncan's wrestling, training at an American top team, living in the dorms, like Greg Hardy. Remember when that experience happened? But if you look at it for Chris Duncan, living in the dorms, training with some of the better fighters there, and he's got pictures with Dustin Poirier. He's training with Johnny Eblen, wrestler. How about Yaroslav Amosov, wrestler?
Just what a stable to train with.
Yeah, good to see that for Chris Duncan coming into this fight. For Ashmouz, still out of K Dojo Warrior Tribe, the old Khabib gym. But I mean, for Ashmouz, if the wrestling was good, it was good in his fights. If it was bad, it was bad. And then he had to come back with his hands. And that's the thing that you have to worry about with a guy like Yanal Ashmouz. He's no Trevor Peek. No. He's got it as the fights go on. So Matt, the odds in this one, they are relatively close. It is about a pick'em. We have a look at the fan vote on Tapology. Matt, the fans are wild. I'm going to say over under 80% Yanal Ashmouz.
I think they'll be under that.
I think they're going to be under?
Slightly.
791 total votes, 76% Ashmouz, 82% by knockout. For the 24% that have Duncan, 55% by decision, 34% by knockout. So who do you have in the fight?
So with this fight, I kind of got to go back to what I say this often. How big is the market correction based off their last performance?
There's a lot of those on this card.
Oh, 100%. But for Ashmouz, you can easily get caught up in his ability to close that distance, laying those power hooks. And I am going to pick Yanal. I just don't want people to think I'm only picking him because he looks so good in his last matchup. Duncan's been clipped, and you brought it up. Omar Morales isn't the biggest power puncher by any means, but he's a good technical striker. And when he was able to start to hit Duncan was uncomfortable, might be a stretch too far, but he didn't really like what was coming back his way. And if Ashmouz can defend some of those initial takedowns and make him really respect his power on the feet, I think Yanal is that much better in his own striking, and that's why I have him in the matchup.
Yanal Ashmouz, 2023's, 2022's Terrence McKinney. Kid's on a roll, and people expect big things out of him. Cross training at not just the K Dojo Warrior Tribe, but Tiger Schulman's for this one as well. He mentioned that in an interview with the All-Star MMA's, JHK MMA. Ever so slightly, I'll go with Yanal Ashmouz. But again, if you go back and watch those fights on his way up into the UFC, the wrestling was a little bit of an issue. And Scotland's own Duncan can put those wrestling shoes on. So a tricky fight if you're trying to make a pick on it. Both of us going with Israel's Yanal Ashmouz to get the win. Some big-time fights on this card, including a co-main event between Molly McCann and Yulia Stolyarenko. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. So we always say, let's get into it. From the marquee to the prelims, Brazil's Ketlen Vieira looking to bust through the top 5. And if you look at it for Ketlen Vieira, trying to follow up on the heels of an awesome victory in last weekend's main event by Maeda Bueno Silva. And with that title vacant, all of a sudden in steps Bonsai, Sweden's Penny Kianzad, looking for that same shot. Both these women very, very close in the rankings. For Kianzad, it's been a lengthy layoff since she beat Lena Landsberg again, because they fought in MMA.
One of the great rivalries in history, really.
They fought in shoot fighting, and for Kianzad, she does get that win. However, not without getting hit in the second round. And Kianzad won about 14 minutes and 30 seconds of that fighter last time out against Lena Landsberg. They break. Landsberg steps in with an elbow in the second round, and it drops Kianzad, who pops right back up. So for Kianzad, she went all the way through the Ultimate Fighter Season 28, takes on Macy Chasson, and in the second round of that fight, Macy blitzes her, hits her with a hard overhand right, more of a right cross, but you get the drill. Penny Kianzad drops, and then Chasson ends up getting the submission win. Kianzad's had some knock him out, drag him out type of fights in the UFC with Julia Avila, who hits her and drops her. It's been an interesting run, but for Kianzad, again, I touched on her shoot fighting lineage. She was a Swedish champ there. She made it very far in that discipline. But in pro MMA, it really is a lot of volume, a lot of striking on the outside. The kicks are great. The clinch work is great. And so that's what made the Kianzad fight against Landsberger last time out so much fun. She also was able to outstrike and defend takedowns against Sijara Eubanks round 1, round 2, only to get outboxed by Eubanks in the third round of that matchup. For Kianzad, she's more of a Swiss Army knife with her striking than Ketlen Vieira, who blitzes forward and throws big strikes. But we haven't really seen that out of Vieira all that often. When Vieira's winning in the UFC, it's got to be takedown heavy and lock down, grapple down with her grappling. You saw that in the performance bonus she had against one Sarah McMahon, where she was able to submit her.
I probably talked about that fight too much.
With a wrestling choke. So for Vieira, I said for the marquee to the prelims, back-to-back main events against former champs. She beats Miesha Tate. She beats Holly Holm. Vieira's last time out, she loses a split decision to Raquel Pennington. MMA decisions, 130-27 Vieira, 12-29-28 Vieiras, and 2-29-28 Penningtons. How the tides have turned, because if Vieira won that fight, look at what happened to Pennington. Weighed in as an alternate for Nunes' last title fight. So Vieira knocking on that door. Now she gets a shot against Kianzad. So it's striker versus...
It feels like she's been knocking on that door for years, though. Let me just say that. Like, for Ketlen, that Sarah McMahon fight was supposed to be the one that kind of catapults her. I'm not saying that win was supposed to get her a title shot.
The Aldana fight was the one.
That was a big fight, too. But the McMahon fight was the first massive name on her resume to where, okay, that's a fighter who fought for a UFC title. She might not be in her prime, or at least most people thought that at the time, but Sarah McMahon, to her credit's been, like, she's still a pretty good fighter. But for Ketlen... it's so interesting because, yes, she can strike forward and blitz forward, but she's not going to beat a lot of ranked fighters with that capacity because she leaves herself open way too much with a lot of those strikes. Now, against Penny Kianzad, it's interesting because for Kianzad, when the fight is on her terms, she's phenomenal. But if you start to mess up her game plan, she will start to, and panic is too strong of a word, of course, but she won't fight in the exact same way. You bring up her volume, if she's the one being pressured backwards and really being forced to think on the fly, she's not the same fighter as she is when she's the one pushing forward.
So one of the things that I noticed in the tape study for Kianzad, Dominic Cruz has talked about it in multiple Kianzad fights, backs up on a straight line every time. But for Kianzad, if you look at it, the strike differential through her 5-3 UFC career, 5.32 to 4.12. And
very high in both regards.
I don't like to bring up the numbers all the time, but for this fight, these numbers I think make a lot of sense. That's a positive 1.2 significant strike differential. For Ketlen Vieira, the differential, 3.24 to 4.16. That's a negative 0.92. And yes, she is 7-3 in the UFC. She's had big wins. But when it comes to the striking, unless it's wall and stall or she's able to get it down to the mat, she can get outstruck quite handily on the feet. And you saw that, like, her oddball fight against Yana Santos.
Well, that's the thing about Ketlen. Like, her strengths are very obvious. Anybody can tell you what she's good and bad at. It's just, how is that skill set going to look against other fighters in the top 15? Ketlen, to me, is one of those fighters, and I bring this up sometimes. There's fighters who might be outside the rankings or at the latter half of the top 15, and you think, okay, if they ever fought the champion, that'd be a really good matchup, right? It's just, how do they ever get their way up the rankings? Yeah,
like Jack Della Maddalena.
No, I still thought he won that fight, honestly. But for Ketlen, I genuinely thought she was going to be a really difficult matchup for Amanda Nunes, because with her style of wrestling and grappling, yes, on the feet, Amanda's so much better, it doesn't matter, but if Ketlen was able to get top position and start to threaten with a lot of those chokes, I think Ketlen could make that fight very interesting, but the issue has always been, can she fill in the other parts of her game enough to where her strengths are accentuated? Because, again, for Ketlen, that Sarah McMahon fight was important, not only for the submission she pulled off, she was put in the exact same submission that she pulled off like 90 seconds before. It was defending a head and arm choke, this is easy, throw Sarah McMahon over and immediately get her in one. I think for Ketlen, you're right. On the feet, Pennington is probably going to be able to win rounds due to her volume, but if Ketlen gets her down to the mat, even one time, maybe it won't result in a submission, but I think it will be enough to negate some of the volume Penny can do on the feet.
And that's the trouble that I have. Kianzad Arte Suave for the longest time, as well as All-Stars. She trained with Teresa Bleda to get Bleda ready for Gabi Fernandez. You saw how good Bleda looked out in that matchup against the striker, which is what Kianzad would have done in that camp. So when you look at this one, Vieira is like a 2-1 favorite, which kind of feels weird. If we have a look at the Topology votes, surprised us there to you. Again, the fans are a little wild. I'm going to say over under 70% Vieira in this one.
Probably over.
And it is over, so 804 total votes, 86% Vieira, 89% by decision for the 14% that have Kianzad, 87% by decision. I haven't seen Kianzad struggle all that mightily against a big-time grappler in the UFC, less the Raquel Pennington fight, which is one that was back and forth, and it was close, as well as the Vieira fight with Pennington. But when I'm trying to make a pick on this one, the more I watch tape, the more it clouded my judgment.
I've still got the favorite in the matchup, and I do think Ketlen Vieira is going to do enough, with her clinch to just negate some of that volume that Penny Kianzad can use, because I don't think Kianzad is going to win this fight by a stoppage. She could. I've been wrong many times before. I'll be wrong many times again. But I do think her volume really is the key to winning rounds in this matchup, and I bring it up. I think Ketlen's ability to close that distance and just kind of get rid of all the oxygen in this matchup is going to help her. Now, is that going to make for the most fun fight to watch? Probably not, but if she gets it down to the mat, I think her submission threat ability is much higher than Raquel Pennington's, even though her wrestling probably isn't at the same level. But for Vieira, it's just been
Wasn't,
exactly. But Ketlen is one of those fighters who, again, it's the striking, not great. The wrestling, if it was way better, then it would open up the best part of her game that much more. So for Ketlen, I'll be looking for a lot more takedowns. I do have her in the matchup.
I also have Ketlen Vieira in the fight, but if you can hear it from her voices, I don't necessarily love it. Matt, this is an interesting fight on the card. And if we move the chains forward, the next fight on this one, Marc Diakiese taking on Spain's Joel Alvarez. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend, Makhmud Muradov finally gets a striker. And finally, Bryan Barberena gets a striker. And for Bryan Barberena, bam, bam, he's won 5 Fight of the Nights in the UFC. He's competed from lightweight to welterweight to now middleweight. This is Barberena's first fight at middleweight since his King of the Cage spin back in 2010. So for Barberena, a big step up in that respect. And for Muradov, again, I make sense of the fact that these guys took on grapplers recently, because for Muradov, he has the Gerald Meerschaert fight, and he's more than a 5-1 favorite in that one. Punches himself out in the first round. Second round, he gets submitted. His last time out against Caio Borralho, Muradov wrestled against Caio Borralho in the second round and in the third round. He had a great reversal. He was on his back and he swept Borralho and got on top in that second round. So for Muradov, he showed growth in his game his last time out. The prospect out of Ankos MMA. It's hard to say prospect when you've had 33 pro fights and you're 33 years old. But for Muradov, it's kind of been not necessarily realized. He had a couple of performance bonuses on the way up through. He beat Andrew Sanchez, and listen, that wasn't wrestling Sanchez. That was, listen, I'm
gonna play around on the outside. Yeah.
So yeah, the former Ultimate Fighter winner Sanchez. But for Muradov, you know how crystal boxing is, and you know how good he can move on the balls of his feet on the outside. And now he gets a striker just like that in Bryan Barberena, a tricky southpaw. That awesome fight against Robbie Lawler, an awesome fight against Matt Brown. I can go through all those fight of the nights that he had.
What about Sage Northcutt, Craig?
But for Bryan Barberena, I mean, they call him the Ellenberger killer just in Nebraska.
Oh.
But if you look at it, Barberena debuted at lightweight against Joe Ellenberger, finished him in the 3rd round, an awesome win there for him. But it's just been such an interesting career progression. And for Bryan Barberena's last time out, it was in London. He was wearing the overalls with his wife walking around town. And then he went in there against Gunnar Nelson and looked like he never grappled a day in his life, which is sad.
Gunnar Nelson's pretty sick.
For Barberena, training out of Gym O, that's one of the best grappling camps you're going to be a feature of in the UFC.
It definitely is. I still don't know if that can make up for the lifetime of knowledge that Gunnar Nelson has on the mat. I know Gunnar hasn't had the greatest run as of late, but I think everybody does realize.
No, it's been good lately.
If that guy gets into the mat, though, his jiu-jitsu is not one of one, but it is very high level. I know Leon Edwards was able to get out of some bad positions, but that's Leon Edwards. What I will say is, I like watching Bryan Barberena fight, and I like watching Makhmud Muradov fight. I'm very excited for this matchup, and I can't hide it at all, because, again, I like watching both guys compete, not like I'm rooting for either one of them, but Bryan Barberena has that dog in him, and that's a term that Craig has very much come around on in the last year and a half. I vividly remember you just hating it all the time.
I might make jokes about it when the camera's off. I hate it.
Bryan Barberena definitely has whatever that dog is in him, though. When the fight gets tough, that's when Bryan Barberena tends to succeed. And I liken him a little bit to like a smaller version of Forrest Griffin. Remember when Forrest Griffin would go out there, throw a lot of really nice combinations, be a very well-rounded mixed martial artist, but the fight didn't really start until a little bit of blood was shown. And for Barberena, that really has been his style as of late. Now, I know Gunnar Nelson, that fight didn't really go far enough to see the blood, but you get how Bryan Barberena likes to go about his business. My curiosity is, how does Makhmud Muradov deal with the kicks of Bryan Barberena? Because Barberena's the guy who does get a lot of work done with his hands, don't get me wrong, but I've always felt like his kicks have been an underrated part of his game, and if he is able to use those kicks, Makhmud Muradov's the bigger guy in this matchup. You bring up the weight classes and how Bryan Barberena is a former lightweight. I'm very interested to see how he looks at 185, but for Muradov, if he's not able to get past some of those kicks, not that I think he can't win this fight, but it does make his job quite a bit more difficult.
I think Muradov wrestles in this matchup, and we've seen Muradov wrestle all the way up through.
Do you think he just starts wrestling, or does he ease into it after?
I think he'll ease into it, and I don't necessarily see it being kind of like a pendulum swing where Barberena's having all the success in the world with the striking. Now all of a sudden Muradov, between rounds, we're lacing up the wrestling shoes like he's Mark Coleman. I think Muradov, I mean, you look at the gym that he trains out of. It's Ankos MMA. There's an Ankos guy who's one half of the main event coming up in Marcin Tybura. You look at Carlos Vamola. What the is that guy doing with his body? Because he is cut up and orange. Carlos Vamola, post UFC.
A one of one.
Holy sweet that guy's got it going on. But for Muradov, training with those bigger guys to get ready for a matchup like this, I think that's a lot of success. Already just kind of money in the bank for him. But when you look at it for Barberena, I say this every single Barberena fight. You train at Gym O. Who's the main guy? John Salter. And then you go down through the list of everybody. I'm so excited. Who can
it's a great fight.
And grapple. Joe Selecki. Impic Sanganai's been there for a long time. You just continue to go down through the list. And Barberena has equal amounts of training partners to that of Makhmud Muradov. Now, last weekend, you had a main event with Holly Holm and Maeda Bueno Silva. Why do I say that? Holly Holm, former bantamweight champ, 1.5 million Instagram followers. That's why she's in a main event. Makhmud Muradov, 2 million Instagram followers.
Floyd Mayweather says that's the guy.
And Floyd Mayweather, yeah, Team Money, or the Money Team. But yeah, you don't really see Floyd.
Not as much as he did on the way into the UFC.
No. So, Matt, when it does come down to this one, Muradov is heavily favored, though his striking game is very boxing-oriented with not a ton of kicks. His cardio normally is quite good, but you saw it tested against Gerald Meerschaert where he went for the finish and blew that load. If we have a look at the topology votes in this one, Matt, surprised us there to you. I think they're going to be closer than the odds would suggest.
I don't know. I think Muradov's going to be in like the 90th percentile.
I'm going to say under on that one. And it is under, so 817 total votes, 85% Muradov, 64% by knockout for the 15% that are Barberena, 43% by decision, 47% by knockout. And I think Makhmud Muradov wins this fight. I think he's really rounded his game out as just the wrestler to where he is today. So for me, I do like Muradov in this one. Big fighter, pressure fighter. But if you look at Barberena, go back to his fight of the night against Jason Witt. Wrestling ain't and look at what Barberena was able to do in that one. Matt, I've got a lot of bleeps to throw in this video.
I have a difficult time with this fight because I really do think Bryan Barberena is going to make a much better account of himself than the odds would suggest. Because for Muradov, when the going gets tough, he does start to just kind of accentuate the things he does well. He'll just try to knock you out with one punch if you really are in his face. And for Bryan Barberena, I do think his style of just being gritty on the outside is going to give him some success to where maybe this is a fight where Barberena loses, but you feel a lot better
like the
about
Luke
him at
fight.
185. Yeah, a little bit. So I do have Muradov in the matchup. I think your point about the wrestling is a very good one to bring up because Barberena has been taken down so many times that Muradov's camp's probably just looking at that quite a bit and really trying to go after it. So I have Muradov, but I do think he's going to have enough success on the feet to where we're not going to see the wrestling until later in the fight.
A UFC fight week with Carlos Vamola is a fight week that I'm excited for. 54% wrestling defense or takedown defense for Barberena in the UFC. Both of us going with Uzbekistan's Makhmud Muradov to get the win in the matchup. Some big time fights on this card. Tom Aspinall is taking on Marcin Tybura in that main event. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.
Heavyweights in the marquee, heavyweights on the prelims. We have the UFC debut of England's Mick Parkin training with one half of the heavyweights in the marquee, Tom Aspinall. For Parkin, he gets to take on the Stormtrooper, was the nickname on the regional scene. It's Jamal Pogues, a guy who, well, it took him a couple times in Contender Series to get the win. Dana White almost felt pity. That's kind of what it sounded like. But for Pogues in his UFC debut, he took on a fighter who's 2-2 in the UFC, and Josh Parisian out-wrestled him, gets that first UFC win, and now Pogues gets to, I don't know, take on a debuting fighter as a little bit of a, like a reward. It's a little bit of an odd bit of matchmaking when you look at this fight, because for Jamal Pogues, got close to the top on the regional scene. Fought Alex Polizzi for the light heavyweight championship with the LFA. Got submitted in the 4th round by a heel hook, but he had really good moments of success in that fight. For Alex Polizzi, well, he didn't beat Yoel Romero, but like Polizzi's a good fighter too. So for Jamal Pogues, he can get it done with the striking on the outside. He likes to close distance quick. He really, really likes to wrestle and chain things together. And so does Mick Parkin with a lot of his takedowns. He will go full bodyweight takedown. And the thing that you like out of Mick Parkin is training for this one, not just with Tom Aspinall, but you talk about champ camp. Phil DeFries in that camp. Both guys.
Parkin, Francis, where you at, Phil DeFries?
Parkin and Phil DeFries out of Sunderland. Just an area of England that's underrepresented in these mixed martial arts. But we talked extensively about Mick Parkin on the Contender Series show because he fought Eduardo Neves in a main event in week 2. So let's throw it on over to a clip for Mick Parkin.
And then it comes, Matt, to the main event. Eduardo Neves taking on Michael Parkin, or Mick Parkin, as it's been said and shown everywhere else. So, Matt, when I do look at this fight, this is probably the one where I did the most tape study. I wrote the most notes. I'm the most invested in because I looked at that heavyweight fight where you had, nice Aris FC champ taking on my guy Cortez Acosta. And I thought, geez, this is a really good fight. These two guys, Waldo Cortez Acosta, much more skilled. Power punching comes out of his opponent. And then I look at this fight on this week's episode. Neves taking on Parkin. These guys are polar opposites. Eduardo Neves coming out of that southpaw stance, he really does hit hard. He's got speed in his hands. And the thing that I really like, he throws from odd angles too. Like he'll throw a shovel hook, jump into it, and then throw a left cross. I absolutely love what I've seen out of Neves, except he gets hit a lot, does not check leg kicks, and has wonky takedown defense. And against a guy like Mick Parkin, who's trained with Paul Craig, trained with Tom Aspinall, trained with Phil DeFries, you know that with all of those guys, he's going to work his jiu-jitsu and his wrestling. You see that in some of his fights, but he's really awkward when it comes to his takedowns because he gets reversed. But he's a big heavyweight that can ssweep off the bottom. Now, can he do that against a guy who's 265 and Neves? That remains to be seen. If you look at it for Parkin, 7-0-1 the amateur record, 5-0 the pro record, but the combined opponent's record, his debut fights a guy who's 1-10, then 2-17, then 2-3, then 7-7, then 6-9. Parkin hasn't fought a good level competition whatsoever. So that really is a big thing for him. And you have to kind of consider that when you do look at this one, because I think Mick Parkin is a very, very good fighter. I think he also has K1 experience. Now I've seen him get into just a rock'em sock'em type of fight against Mario Costandi. And then he fought Zoma and he got knocked out by a left hook, like springboard knocked out, like done. So for Parkin, pretty labored in his shots. For Neves, he is the more, I guess, selective of his shots. But these two guys really do throw down. I think it's going to be a good fight while it lasts.
It should be a fun fight, but it's so weird that the UFC still considers the heavyweight to be like this weird legacy division where they're like, hey, heavyweights on the main card, they should probably be the co-main event or the main event. I think Eduardo is going to win this fight any single way it goes, though, if I'm being completely honest. I do think Parkin's the better grappler. Don't get me wrong. He has the better wrestling. He's very heavy on top. And like you said, he does have a good ability to kind of float even for a bigger guy in the heavyweight division with his jiu-jitsu. I just don't think he has anything to offer Eduardo on the feet, if we're being honest. At the close range, I think he is going to eat a lot of shots in the clinch. That's something Eduardo is pretty good at. He can throw some elbows in there, get kind of dirty with his knees, too. I don't mean dirty in a bad way. I just mean he's kind of filthy with it. He's good with them. And I just don't know what Parkin's going to do if he isn't able to get that takedown. And even if he is able to wrestle his way to a round 1 victory, let's say, is that going to help him more than it hurts him? Because his cardio is a little bit suspect as fights go late. And against a guy like Eduardo, who does carry his power deep into fights, he's not just one of these heavyweights who can only get a knockout really early. I do worry about Parkin and just how is he going to have sustained levels of success in this matchup.
So as you'll remember on that show, the winners in the episode, D. Gomes, she's 2-1 in the UFC now. You also had Cameron Simon, 3-0 in the UFC right now. How about Jesus Aguilar?
What an episode!
2-1, and also you had Osteron's own Darius Flowers, who was in the comments section. Now, another thing to note. So you have fighters with 3 fights of experience after that episode. Flowers hasn't fought because of what I just mentioned, some USADA complications. Mick Parkin also hasn't fought, and I had a heavy dose of COVID when we were doing that episode. Wow. So a lot of things to remember from last August.
Time.
Now, Matt, when we look at Mick Parkin's fight against Neves, why are you doing the Ali shuffle, Neves? Like, what are you doing?
It was a weird performance.
Parkin got hit quite a bit. He landed some big glancing blows of his own. He ends up getting the takedown. He ends up getting the finish. Both these two guys, Matt, fight very, very similar to one another.
They do, and I don't want to be overcritical of Mick Parkin, but I am a little bit concerned about how he's going to be able to blend his wrestling and his grappling in a lot at the UFC level, and this is why I say it. He's got hit a lot on the regional scene to where he does hold a very high posture. It's something we've talked about.
In kickboxing and in MMA.
Exactly, and for Parkin, again, I do think he's a talented heavyweight. He does have a very good skill set. He fights like a guy who is a little bit smaller than he is because he's a big heavyweight, but I do think his hitability on the feet is going to hold him back to a certain level at the UFC, because for Parkin, he's someone who makes you feel his presence and doesn't always make guys quit, but you get the idea. He's going to hit you with a few good shots on the feet. He's a very physically strong guy, and like we saw in Contender Series, if he gets the back and if he's able to get under the chin, he has a great RNC, and he does have very high-level submissions outside of just the rear naked choke. But for Parkin, you can look at the 6-0 and almost get carried away with it, right? You have an undefeated heavyweight. He's fighting not in his hometown, but very close to it. So for Parkin, I just don't know if his hitability factor is going to be too much, because yes, Jamal might not be the guy who's going to take advantage of it. He's much more high volume takedowns over just massive shots from the outside. But for Parkin, that's something that does concern me a little bit as to where his overall ceiling is, because I do like his grappling, I do like his wrestling, but on the feet, outside of some of those bigger one-punch shots, I do think he's going to struggle in some more elongated exchanges on the feet. Now, luckily, he's not fighting Stipe in his debut, so you do have a little bit of time to build, but I do think Pogues, with his wrestling style, is at least going to be able to get close to Parkin in this matchup. And if he can get close to Parkin, that means not only can he take him down, he could probably hit him too.
Well, and that's a tricky one. I mean, we're going to see who's able to outlast in this matchup. And you talk about both these guys being big, but they're both quite fleet of foot when they're in the octagon.
I think Pogues is a good build for this weight class.
He's odd because I thought even though he had a fight at heavyweight on Contender Series, he popped back down to light heavyweight. And for Mick Parkin, watching him fight, I think, geez, this guy's big, but he's trimmed down a little bit, and he looks like a guy that could also make a move to light heavyweight. The level of competition that Parkin took on the regional scene started off 1-10, 2-17, 2-3, 7-7, 6-9, and then Neves, who was 5-0 over on Contender Series, who landed a good right hand, and I'm not joking, Ali shuffled his way to a loss. So this should be a very interesting fight. Jamal Pogues is favored to get the win in the matchup. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say over under 75% Jamal Pogues going into enemy territory.
I genuinely think they're going to be over. I think it'll be like 80.
It's under. Oh my gosh! 765 total votes. 71% Parkin. Sunderland, stand up. 26% by decision. 31% by submission. 37% by knockout. For the 29% that have Pogues, 71% by decision. You know why? You know why?
No, I don't, honestly.
Because Jamal Pogues training at Syndicate, but he also trains out of the PI. He's there training with one Brandon Marshall, your favorite Miami Dolphin.
Wow.
Brandon Marshall. So, yeah, interesting stuff there from Jamal Pogues. I think he gets the win over Mick Parkin because I've seen it against a better level competition. I like the durability out of Pogues. I like the cardio out of Pogues. If Parkin takes him down, I don't think it would surprise anybody, but I do like Pogues in the matchup.
I do like Pogues in the matchup too, but as somebody who's cheered for the Miami Dolphins for a long time, you don't know how much you like a player until Tyreek Hill comes and plays for your team. I'll tell you that much. So I've got Jamal Pogues in the matchup.
Both of us going with Pogues to get the win. It's some big time fights in this card. The next fight, it really is. It's Marc Diakiese taking on Joel Alvarez. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Neil Yakupov, Anthony Bennett, Brian Bullington, they're all busts in pro sports. And coming up this weekend at lightweight, looking to avoid that dreaded moniker, we have the Bone Crusher, Marc Diakiese, taking on El Fenomeno, Joel Alvarez. And listen, I mean, for both these guys, they lost their respective last fights. For Alvarez, it was a long time ago against Arman Tsarukyan. He got beat to a pulp. And for Marc Diakiese, everybody had him to beat Michael Johnson, but when the takedowns didn't work and the striking wasn't there, it was Johnson, pitter-patter, let's get at her like Letterkenny on the outside, and getting that win over Diakiese. And if you look at it, Matt, I mean, for Marc Diakiese, we talk about how good could the wrestling be. Well, you saw that against Slava Borshev. You saw that against Damir Hadzovic, both primary strikers, but 11 takedowns against one Borshev and 8 against Damir Hadzovic. Off to the races. Double knee wraps. Marc Diakiese. Great Britain top team. Brad Pickett in the corner. There's so much to like about Diakiese, but where I say Yakupov, who's now bounced around in the KHL.
Yeah, what happened to him?
He bounced around in the KHL. Where I say Anthony Bennett, he bounced around everywhere.
He averaged 1.7 points per game on a team that won the Euro League. That's tough.
Wild. Diakiese was one of those guys that came into the UFC with a lot of flash and flair. A Bama lightweight champ, and we've got a lot of former Bama champs on this card. Paul Craig was a light heavyweight champ there. Daniel Barez was a Bama flyweight champ. Diakiese got his bread buttered there. He comes into the UFC, and you look at the fights that he had and the wins that he had. That giant performance bonus 30-second knockout over Teemu Packalén.
One of my favorite knockouts ever.
And then it's a 3-fight losing streak for Diakiese, and it's been a lot of wins, a lot of losses so far. For Joel Alvarez, comes in as an AFL lightweight champ, and if you know anything about the AFL, not that great. So you look at Alvarez and you go, okay, well, who are some famous Spanish fighters in the UFC? And you go, Abner Lavares? Like, is he the only one I can think of? Juan Espino, Juan recently retired. Joel Alvarez is one of 2 Spanish fighters on this card, and they're the only 2 active. It's Alvarez and it's Daniel Barez, and that's it. But for Alvarez, you saw a lot of, I'm getting taken down, and then I'm getting the submission, like against Danilo Belluardo, like he did against Joe Duffy. The only fight where we saw Joel Alvarez do something we've never seen in his pro career before, although there were some people that pointed it out before his fight, against Thiago Moises, he fought mean. He walked forward. The elbows, the strikes, the kicks, everything was there for Joel Alvarez. And he's got a really nice teep. He'll throw it as a teep to the body, mix it into the head. Alvarez, when he strikes, is really fun to watch. But again, his last time out, terrible visuals against Arman Tsarukyan, who's a very good fighter. So Alvarez in this camp, training at home, but also going to Morocco to train with the Azaitsars. Ottman, was it a stoppage? If you're getting punched in the face, don't give 2 thumbs up.
That elbow is pretty cool.
That's never a good look. But when you look at this fight, Matt, again, the striking is there for both men.
So was Alvarez against Moises, Christoph Waltz, and Inglourious Bastards? Was that like Apex Mountain for him?
I don't know.
Because for me, Alvarez, if he is able to demonstrate that level of striking along with the jiu-jitsu that we all obviously know he has, then he is a really dangerous fighter. We haven't even brought up the fact that he's a 6'3" lightweight. Like, Joel Alvarez is one of the biggest guys in the weight class.
The end. That's the nightcap point of this one. You put a little bit of Bailey's in the coffee. Matt, Joel Alvarez,
He's so big.
157.5. Once he showed up for a lightweight fight, 159.5. So it's always a worry whether or not Joel Alvarez is going to make that weight.
100%. And at 6'3", no wonder it's a worry for him to weigh in at 155. But this is an interesting fight because if both guys show up at their best versions, we're basically getting maybe a ranked lightweight fight is a bit of a stretch too far, right? But if Marc Diakiese is able to show on the feet what he's been able to do in the past, and for Diakiese, I've had a really hard time reading him, especially after that losing streak, and I think a lot of people have, because the Nasrat Haqparast loss is a really bad one, right? He was getting beat up on the feet and just really didn't look like he wanted to accept that damage, but to his credit, he was able to reinvent himself and really add a lot more offensive takedowns into his game, because the guy who fought Teemu Packalén, for as good as his striking looked, would not have been able to go for the level of takedowns he's been able to go for in his last number of fights. But for Diakiese, I've always really wondered this. Is him reinventing his style the thing that gets him a higher ceiling, or the thing that just makes him stay in the UFC for a little bit longer? Because if Diakiese is able to blend his wrestling in with the level of striking he's at right now, he's still a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but if he had kind of the two parts of his game that were able to blend together a little bit better, I do think we would get a borderline top 15 talent. And that might seem crazy to say now, but looking at where Marc Diakiese is in his career. You can come after me saying I'm ridiculous, but like, Marc Diakiese at one point had lightning fast hands, really quick kicks as well, is really good at keeping his distance, and can go for the offensive takedown. I know there's some weaknesses in there too, but those are foundations and skills you can definitely build upon. And especially against a guy like Alvarez, who is so long on the outside.
And Alvarez was on that way, that top 15, everything. He fought Thiago Moises. He gets that win. Then he takes on Arman Tsarukyan. That fight, February 26, 2022. So Alvarez was out a full year, and then he was due back earlier this spring against Zubair Tukhugov, and he is out, is Joel Alvarez. So Elvis Brenner steps in and then sets the world on fire. So we'll see how this one goes, Matt. Alvarez with the layoff is favored to get the win. We have a look at the Topology vote. Surprise us there to you. People don't like picking Marc Diakiese in fights.
Which is weird because I feel like I pick him in every video.
Not the last... Oh, you don't know. Yeah, you did. In this one, I'm going to say over under 75% Alvarez.
Probably over.
And it is over. So 836 total votes, 88% Alvarez, 63% by submission for the 12% that have Diakiese, 73% by decision. I'm going to go one hit, one kill jiu-jitsu, Joel Alvarez, to get the win in the matchup. I think the striking can get it done. I don't like the pullback on a taller guy at 155. But Diakiese hasn't shown me that striking in years.
Exactly.
So I'll go with Alvarez, even though his takedown defense is porous. You gotta walk so you can run with your jiu-jitsu.
And that's the weird thing about Joel Alvarez. He does fight a bit like a Mackenzie Dern, right? You don't look at the offensive wrestling percentage and think, wow, this guy really is like next level. But he is able to use his pressure to make his opponents take him down, something Marc Diakiese does do when he gets pressured, and it works for him. I'm not saying it's gonna work for everybody. You wouldn't teach everybody who has the level of jiu-jitsu Alvarez has to fight like him, but he has been able to make it work against people who aren't at the level of an Arman Tsarukyan. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but Arman Tsarukyan's a pretty talented fighter, so I also get Alvarez in this matchup, but I really think this could be a fun fight.
I got two Spaniards on the card. Matt's got one, a big-time matchup at lightweight. The next one coming up, Hot Chocolate Danny Roberts is taking on Jonny Parsons. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. This fight is like the end of the intro to the home improvement show from the 90s. You look at it and you go, huh? We have Danny Roberts, Hot Chocolate, taking on the Sluggernaut, Jonny Parsons. And Matt, for Danny Roberts, he's been in this position time and time again. He fought Mike Perry, fought Oliver Enkamp, he fought Michel Pereira, he fought Zalim Imadaev, he fought Jack Della Maddalena. Danny Roberts is the guy at welterweight that you bring in to lose to your prospect. And if he wins, then he wins. And that's kind of how it goes. He beat Zalim Imadaev with a complete game plan. He beat Oliver Enkamp, didn't get buggy choked. He's had good fights against decent fighters. And for Danny Roberts, he's won more than he's lost. So he's in the spot again, training this time as he used to at a Killcliff FC. Now, Danny's last time out, he fought Jack Della. He got outboxed. He was training back home in the UK. But this time, Killcliff, you get to train with Michael Chandler and the boys. So I opened this the way that I did with the home improvement reference because for Jonny Parsons, I thought, why hasn't he fought since 2021? So then I do my deep dive and I listened to the interviews and I found one that he did with James Lynch, Combat Sport UK. And James says, and this is going to be a weird read, but this is how he said it. James says, what's been keeping you out of the cage for so long? This is what Jonny Parsons said, and I transcribed. Man, really? Well, you know, it's kind of tough to talk about, you know? I mean, especially like, you know, the biggest thing is I'm healthy now. You don't like that. So then Jonny goes on to say this. You didn't watch the interview, so I'm going to continue. He goes, I was having some really bad concussion symptoms where, you know, I wasn't really able to train without getting headaches. He also said 6 weeks out from the Contender Series fight, I got knocked out cold. So that was in the window where you're not supposed to get knocked out and take a fight. But Jonny did, and he got a win by split decision over Solomon Renfro. His other quotes that he said, he's training out a syndicate, lacking welterweight bodies. And then he said, I've dropped a lot of weight in this camp. He's lost like 30 pounds. So everything I heard from Jonny Parsons in that interview makes me not want to pick him in this fight. And then I go and I watch his tape after I listen to the interview. And I know I struggled there, but For Johnny Parsons watching his tape, I think he's a perfect guy to beat Danny Roberts, unless the post-concussion symptoms and the weight cut really, really do affect
He's got a great right hand over the top, really nice power on it, can throw variety with that shot too. It's not just an overhand or a straight, he can throw it in a hook variety. Remember when Darren Till was on the come up and that was his big thing, right? They were like, he can throw the left hook as a straight, as an uppercut, as an overhand. It's something that now everybody can do.
Parsons with the uppercut.
But that's the nice thing about Parsons. He does have variety with that one side of his striking. And what I like about Parsons too is that right leg kick is a very effective weapon for him. And if he's able to use it against a guy like Danny Roberts, who himself is very boxing heavy with his own attack, it's going to limit Danny Roberts in the amount of power shots he can throw. But this is the only thing I'm going to say. And feel free to disagree with me. I look at this fight like when Jim Miller fought Roosevelt Roberts, and this is why. I don't know if Johnny Parsons is ready to beat Danny Roberts, even though he could beat Danny Roberts. And this is why I say it. If you beat Danny Roberts, then you're going to fight a really good fighter after that, right? Like, you're going to fight somebody who we all know, who's probably been in the UFC for a bit. I still think Danny Roberts isn't a bit of that category. I think if Parsons is able to get that win, not that he's some spring chicken, right? He's 31 years old. He's not one of these uber prospects. But I've still always felt like if you beat Danny Roberts, you're at least going to get in line for them to start building you towards a ranking. And for Parsons, if he isn't able to start rounding out the rest of his skill set, if it is just a lot of that right leg kick heavy, good jabs, nice right hand, I'm a little bit concerned to see who else he can match up against.
Parsons looks like if you took a Muay Thai fighter and put them into MMA.
100%.
That's what Johnny Parsons does, because he has an amateur Muay Thai career and he was 6-1 amateur Muay Thai, 4-1 in MMA. He has 185 pound and 195 pound catchweight experience as a pro mixed martial artist. But for Parsons, getting that win over Renfro, who's a very good fighter. I know he lost to Mike Malott, Adam Fugett, and they were crazy knockout losses, but don't forget, Renfro was beating Mike Malott until he got finished. If you look at the fight against Johnny Parsons, Renfro nearly puts Parsons out in the first round, and Parsons just had a good chin, even though he admitted to getting knocked out not that long out. So crazy to see that. But Dana White after the fight said, there were a couple of quotables. He goes, he was a 4-1 dog, and also he's really 155 pounder. So for Parsons to say with James, I cut a lot of weight and cut like 30 pounds in camp to get ready for it, I don't love it. The really long layoff, the 6 months that he had to take where he just had no contact and he coached, that's a good thing for Parsons. He's a coach at Syndicate. He's a striking coach there. You see that out of him. And you saw a coach out of a major gym with a long injury layoff come back and look all right. His last time out in Alexander Munoz last weekend. Parsons looking to do that. But again, when he's southpaw, that right hand's great. The left hand down the middle. The kicks that he throws to the legs and to the body are crazy.
Very good.
But Parsons, as you can see from the picture that I made up, he's not a big guy at welterweight. Like, he carries a little bit down the middle. So we'll see how it plays out for him in this one. He attacks all three levels big time. Danny Roberts, low volume, kind of low event fighter in the UFC, and that's why I have trouble with this. If Parsons didn't say that he had the concussion issues or the weigh-ins, I would pick Parsons. But with that kind of considered in this one, I have a hard time picking this fight. I really do. So when you look at it thrown together, we have a look at the topology vote. Surprise test there to you. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Parsons.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. It's the complete opposite. 735 total votes, 66% Roberts, 75% by decision for the 34% that have Parsons, 36% by decision, 54% by knockout. So who do you have in this fight?
Danny Roberts has every single tool he needs to win this fight. Okay, let me say that first and foremost. He has a good jab. We all know about how good his boxing is. The thing I worry about, though, is if he's hitting a lot of those leg kicks, and if he does find himself backing up in this matchup quite a bit, I agree with everything you said injury-wise with Parsons, but I still think his game is one that Danny Roberts is going to struggle with. I do like the fact that he goes to the leg and the body to start opening up some of those combinations to the head, and for those reasons, I do have Parsons. But again, if this is a fight where Parsons gets KO'd like 3 seconds into it and Danny Roberts looks all good, I wouldn't be surprised either, but I'm going to go back to the point I brought up. Johnny Parsons could very well beat Danny Roberts. I'm curious to see who they put him up against after this, just because Danny Roberts is one of those guys, and you're right, it's made me think about it a little bit more. It's one of those wins that does show something on your resume, but where do you go after that?
And we saw Roberts finish quickly against Jack Della. He got dropped, and it is what it is. But look at the fights that he had early in his UFC career where he came back and looked good. The Dominic Steele fight, the fight of the night that he had against David Zavada as well, really fun. He mixes up body and head with his kicks. His boxing is good, but it's a little bit low volume. So we'll see how it plays out in this matchup. And for Parsons, you want to see a guy check leg kicks? He's one of the better guys coming into the UFC that checks leg kicks. Go watch his fight with Icon against Chavez if you want to see that one, where they don't change the graphic and it says Pete Rodriguez. I got really weirded out on that one. Matt, I have the slugger knot, but I do not love it. So listen, this is a fight you got to watch all fight week and see how things go. You got to watch these two guys weigh in on Friday and see what they look like. And then stepping into the cage, you might like pick the other guy. It really is a tough one. I want to know who the folks have down below in this fight. Some big time ones on this card, including Davey Grant taking on Daniel Marcos up next at bantamweight. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Davey Grant is an ageless bantamweight wonder, and the last time that he competed in England, the home country, he lost to Damian Stasiak. That one in Manchester, but before that, Grant, you can say this, in the UFC, undefeated in London. He picked up that win over Marlon Vera years and years ago. Grant looking to turn away a tricky fighter out of Peru. It is Daniel Marcos. And when you look at these two guys, I mean, for Marcos, undefeated as an amateur, 14-0 as a pro, the wrestling is a hallmark, but he can really get it done with his striking. Really tall tie stance, and he can close distance very well. Good takedown defense. You saw that against Simon Oliveira, who, when the going got tough, Simon backed up and Daniel pressured forward. And you saw some really good defense, but also turning it into offense for the fighter out of American Combat Gym, but also the Goat Shed and KO Zone. That's Daniel Marcos. This is just a weird fight because Davey Grant, just like Danny Roberts on this card, they've had to turn away young fighters before. And Davey Grant, his last couple of fights, I mean, it's been interesting. He gets the win over Luis Smolka, and he looks really good and finishes Smolka. But his last time out against the Sunsao, he's losing that fight. Pillar to post. He drops a Sunsao early in the third round. They don't call it a knockdown. A Sunsao goes back to the wrestling. Davey Grant grabs the fence. Keith Peterson goes, I'm taking a point. But because I took the point, you don't get the position back of Sunsao. Grant lands a spinning back fist that drops the Sunsao. It gets down to the mat. Davey Grant, inverted triangle finish. Grant gets a performance bonus out of that, so if it wasn't bad enough for a Sunsao, he gets kicked in the balls on the way out because $50K more to Davey Grant.
I don't think he cares about how much money Davey Grant
has.
The
losses that, well, he didn't get any money. He lost his win money, too. Marlon Vera and Adrian Yanez losses, and the Yanez fight was a fight of the night, but man, it was 2-1 for sure for Yanez. So you look at a matchup like this, I think at this point in the career, even though Davey Grant's had bigger fights, marquee fights, he's beaten bigger names. I think of that Dragon Martinez win that he has on his record that's amazing. Marcos is a really tricky prospect, even though he only has one fight in the UFC as a win.
He is. The weird thing about Davey Grant is he's defying all logic for an old bantamweight. He's a ton of damage. He's 37. He fights at a lower weight class. Normally you look at all three of those pillars and think, okay, this guy probably isn't the same level of durability he has right now.
Cody Garbrandt wishes he had what Davey Grant
Exactly.
has.
Davey Grant, what I do like about him is he's willing to lose rounds, understanding the fact that it might help him win the fight. Because he's not going to fight at some crazy pace and then taper off as the fight goes on. He's not going to fight a really good second round and then maybe have nothing left in the third. He's just going to be steady for a lot of those 3 rounds, and that's what I do think gives all these prospects a lot of trouble. I know he doesn't beat all of them. Again, you bring up Yanez. Yanez is able to land some massive power shots on Davey Grant, but the thing about Grant is he's not going to beat himself, and I'm glad you bring up the Oliveira fight for Marcos, because when the going got tough, Simon wasn't really there for the fight. I don't think Davey Grant's going to fight
Brazil.
Davey Grant's not going to fight like that whatsoever. If he's going to get stopped in this matchup, it's because he's going to try everything he humanly can to win, and maybe you're going to be better than him on that night. The thing that I kept on going back to for Marcos is not only the fact that I do think he can handle himself on the feet. I don't think Grant's just going to be able to walk forward and use some of those more unorthodox techniques. I like the kicks from Marcos. Now, you bring up the Jonathan Martinez fight, so I have to too. David Grant was able to negate a lot of those same techniques and really have a lot of success, but what I like out of Marcos is those Tony Ferguson front kicks up the middle. He does a really good job at establishing distance with those kicks, and the only negative I would say that comes from that is when he shoots his takedowns after some of those kicks, they are from a little bit too far away, I'll say, but those kicks help him set up his boxing, which then helps him set up his wrestling. I just like how for Marcos, most of his game does work together and really blend itself quite well.
And we talked about it when Marcos is coming into the UFC. I mean, the former 300 Sparta champ, before he took a long layoff, then he moved to the States and left his family in Peru, started training at American Combat Gym with Charles Rosa, beats Brandon Lewis as an underdog on Contender Series, gets a contract, beats Simon Oliveira as an underdog to then get this matchup against Davey Grant. And Marcos, you saw it. working the kicks to the body, working the knees to the body, and Simon Oliveira at multiple points looked like Chelsea Chandler running away from the fight in that one. So if you do consider a matchup like this, Marcos, not the greatest level of competition on the regional scene on the come up, but a lot of experience there. So if you do look at a fight like this, with Davey Grant, he is actually the underdog, which might come as a surprise to some people. If you have a look at the votes on Topology, I think the fans will give Grant some shine. I'm going to say over under 65% dangerous Davey Grant.
I think they'll be under.
I think it's going to be under. It's slightly. 803 total votes, 61% Grant, 39% by decision, 49% by knockout, and for the 39% that are Marcos, 59% by decision, 28% by knockout. So the fans have Grant, even though he's the underdog. That's why we like to kind of contrast the two. Who do you have in the matchup?
Saying this isn't going to be a popular thing, but I do worry about how much damage Davey Grant can eat at this stage of his career. Like, he does get hit by big shots. I know he hasn't gone down from those shots, but still, he gets hit by them, and at a certain point, even the greatest of chins do get cracked. Mark Hunt got knocked out, so anybody can walk in the face of the earth. I do worry about that a little bit for Davey Grant, especially at the longer ranges in this matchup, because I do think Marcos can be able to damage him from a lot further away than Grant can damage Marcos. But what I will say is, if Grant can get Marcos up against the cage and sort of eliminate some of those kicks and make it a really ugly fight, I think Davey Grant can not only win minutes, I think he can go out there and win a lot of rounds in this matchup, but I am going to go with the younger fighter in Marcos. I do think he's going to be able to blend his skill set together to win this one, but it's a really difficult matchup.
It is really hard because Davey Grant throws from such unorthodox angles, and for Daniel Marcos, he seems a very process-oriented guy. If you ever watch our videos, there's an ebb and a flow, and the graphics all pop in at the same time. This might be breaking the fourth wall, and I ruined somebody's evening. But if you do look at it, I'm the same way. No, I'm not Daniel Marcos in a fight, but I'm very process-oriented. When you throw a curveball at me like a Davey Grant, the wires kink across a little bit.
I'm hitting that thing over the fence.
We'll see what happens for Daniel Marcos in this one. I will go with him in the matchup. I think he does have the offensive wrestling advantage, and I do like his volume on the outside. But if anybody's going to beat Daniel Marcos, it is Davey Grant. And I know a lot of you will be in the comment section giving Davey Grant some love this week. So let us know who you have in the matchup. We get some big-time fights in this card. The next one, it's Lerone Murphy taking on Joshua Culibao. That's probably my favorite fight of the weekend. I love it. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.
And a very happy birthday to 32-year-old Lerone Murphy turns 32 on Fight Night. Happy birthday, Lerone. He's got a tough as fight coming up against Joshua Culibao, and it's absolutely my favorite fight on this card coming up this weekend. Matt, listen.
Let's get into it.
So these are two fighters that I had absolutely no clue how they're going to fare in the UFC. I didn't think all that highly of Lerone Murphy. And for Joshua Culibao, like moving up a weight class against Jalen Turner, it just didn't make any sense. At this point right now, Murphy 4-0-1 in the UFC. Culibao is tidy 3-1-1. And I've gained such an appreciation for these two guys. Because for Murphy, blending the skills together is when he's at his best. For Culibao, you keep it striking, pretty damn good striker. And you saw it for Culibao his last time out against Melzik Bogdasarian. It was the opposite. He was getting outstruck from distance. Bogdasarian slips on a kick. Culibao jumps to the back, gets the submission, and it is over at home for Australia's Culibao. So an awesome win there his last time out. Split decision win before that over Sungwoo Choi. Had him on skates in the first and second round. Dropped him multiple times. Culibao really coming into his own right now out of Igor MMA. And if you look at it for Murphy, long layoff before his last fight against Gabriel Santos. Wasn't due Gabriel Santos. He was due England's own Nathaniel Wood, who's fighting higher up on this card. Wood out due to a leg injury. So insert LFA champ Gabriel Santos. And I picked Gabriel in that fight. And I'm still kind of salty about the result, but Lerone Murphy gets the win. It's a split decision win, and now he gets to move forward, taking on Joshua Culibao. And again, if these two guys are at their peak powers...
Oh, we have a great fight.
We're just outside. This isn't like 16th, 17th ranked guys at featherweight, because those guys are coming up later on. But these two guys are knocking on that door, and they're very, very good martial artists.
And that's why this is such a fun fight, because for Culibao, I liken his run at lightweight to like Josh Emmett, right? Josh Emmett fought Desmond Green.
Featherweight.
But Josh Emmett fought at lightweight. He fought Desmond Green and Scott Holtzman. Didn't look like the guy that we see at 145, but luckily, to his credit, when he found the right weight class, we have really been able to see him at his best. For Culibao, I do liken him in a similar degree. I think at 145, he probably knows that too. Like 145 is his weight class. I love love his power shots at this weight class. And I do think it's easy to get carried away with some of his submission acumen when he's able to get it down on the mat. But when this guy's able to really land his hooks on people, especially up against the cage, I like Culibao as a pressure fighter. And that really is how a lot of his fights come down to. If he's the one backing up, it doesn't help him go for as many takedown attempts because he's somebody who loves to blend those big power hooks in with his own offensive game. But for Culibao, he's not just like a basic wrestler. He's not just going to get the takedown attempt and kind of hold that one position. He does have good submission ability. And like you bring up, we saw it in his last matchup. I like his ability to take the back. But Lerone Murphy's an interesting case, right? Like he himself is quite well rounded. He's not just going to get absolutely mopped on the mat by a guy like Culibao. So that's where, I'm really curious to see who shoots the first takedown in this matchup. Like, who is going to be uncomfortable enough on the feet to feel like, okay, I have to change the dynamics of this fight? Because I think Murphy, with his steadiness on the feet, is going to be able to have some success. Culibao, for as great as the power shots are, and as much as I want to talk about them, he's not like a Max Holloway who's really going to throw that jab in your face, go to the body a ton, and throw his combinations. So Culibao, with his more power-oriented style, I think he might at least struggle on some of the in-betweens.
Culibao's got really good volume. Both of these guys have really good cardio for the featherweight division, and both guys can struggle in some wrestling exchanges, but to their credit, they're both pretty good grapplers. So again, for Murphy, it was the layoff coming into the fight against Santos. He gets the change of opponent. Got a little bit out-wrestled in that one against Gabriel
Why are we not
Santos.
seeing him fight Nathaniel Wood this
and
weekend,
we'll
is my
see
question.
how, because Andre Feely's got that number. You look at a fight like this, so these two guys are very, very good fighters. Lerone Murphy is the slight favorite. We have a look at the Topology vote. Surprised us there, you. They've been kind of all over the place this week. I'm going to say over under 70% Murphy.
I think they'll be over.
The fans like him. It is over. 827 total votes. 82% Murphy, 79% by decision for the 18% that have Culibao, 68% by decision. This fight, in my mind's eye, is very close. The odds reflect that. And I have a hard time making a pick on this fight. I honest to goodness I do. Because for Culibao, if he can pitter-patter on the outside, blend in his kicks like he always does, he adds that extra layer of depth to a guy like Lerone Murphy. So it's a hard pick for me.
It's a really closely matched fight, and I think that's why a lot of the Tapology voters have it going to decision. Personally, I think it is going to go the full 3 rounds because both guys are so steady with their game plans. I am leaning Lerone Murphy, though, and the reason I say that is I do think the steadiness of his striking game is a little bit different. Culibao, yes, his volume is good, but a lot of it is more of those hooks. Yes, the kicks are very good. I think he's going to struggle really getting some of those kicks off while he's trying to set them up. I think the jab of Murphy's going to give him some trouble.
And it is a tough one, but I think somebody left this here. It says Murphy versus Culibao, and they took the time to close this envelope.
How do you feel being the carrot top of MMA predictions, Craig?
It says, heard it's your birthday. And it also says, Matt, milk it for all it's worth. Hope your day is utterly awesome. And you can see it right there. My pick is Lerone Murphy. The carrot top of MMA strikes again, Matt. Both of us going with Lerone Murphy to get the win. Toss a like on this video, would you please? And carry it forward because the next one on this card, Paul Craig is taking on Andrea Muniz. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. A year ago, Francis Faraziem, the Smile Killer, was on the outside looking in. He fought out his UFC contract. He lost in impressive fashion to Terrence McKinney. And all of a sudden, a short notice call to take on the undefeated Cage Warriors man, Mick Figlak, presented itself. And Faraziem entered that octagon like when Robin Williams is getting his life together in Mrs. Doubtfire. Wow. Papa's got a brand new bag. Faraziem looked amazing in that fight. And coming up this weekend, he's taking on the former Cage Warriors top man, the former champ over there. It is the Black Country banger, Jai Herbert, at a Renegade Jiu-Jitsu. And for Jai Herbert, you look at the UFC run, it's been absolutely insane. Knock him down, drag him out fight against Francisco Trinaldo. Knock him out, drag him out fight against Ilia Topuria. Knock him out, drag him out fight against Canada's Kyle Nelson. And his last time out, if Jai Herbert didn't have that illegal blow, he would have beaten Ludwig Klein. That really would have happened. But it ends up as a draw in the end. 2 28-28s and a 29-27. So Herbert on his way to winning that one. The infraction in the third round, it cost him a win. So now Jai Herbert moves it forward. He just turned 35. He's taking on the 26-year-old Faraziem. And Matt, when I look at this fight, I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. Jai Herbert landed that crazy kick against Ilia Topuria,
nice.
And it's one of the craziest kicks we've seen to not knock somebody out. But Jai Herbert's primarily a boxer. Faraziem, the K1 lineage, you see it with his kickboxing. fought us last time against Mick Figlock. He was picking him up and throwing him around the cage.
This is what I want to bring up about Ziem, and if you want to disagree with it, please do. When's the man going to get a knockout in the UFC? I love his striking, and I really do think it's an extremely technical version. He can fight moving backwards, he has good volume, we know how good the kicks can blend in with the punches, but for Ziem, when are we going to see the power on the other side of that technique? And I think that's why I bring it up in this matchup. We all know how hot Jai Herbert burns in most of his fights, and for Ziem, if he is just going to pitter-patter on the outside, for lack of a better term, really use his volume more than his own power shots, how is he going to fight those initial 4 or 5 minutes of this match? Because if Herbert really is in his face, making him think on the balls of his feet, that was difficult to say, and really try to decipher, okay, what is Jai Herbert throwing at me in terms of his boxing? Because like you bring up, the kick is something that is very nice, but his hands are what get the majority of his work done. How does Ziem fight if Jai Herbert doesn't respect the power coming back his way? That's the big question I have, because again, I love the striking of Ziem. I would just like to see him hurt a few more guys with his striking.
Ziem trains at a Climax Fight Academy. And that goes hard. So good for him, Matt.
He's almost there, folks.
When you do look at it, though, I mean, both of these guys struggle when they're backed up against the cage. We saw Ziem play out well against Mick Figlock, but for Jai Herbert, he can kind of get wall installed on his own volition. And if you look at it for Herbert, gets it done at long range. For Ziem at long range, a lot more kicks. And he will vary his boxing in there, but for Ziem in the UFC at least, where he struggled is with the takedown defense and just trying to keep guys off him. And I know he's won fights in some of those circumstances, and he's had some close fights in some of those circumstances, but it really is like the Holly Holm effect.
Is Jocko a good comp? Not necessarily, but just in terms of great volume striker, if he can keep it on the feet, he's going to really give guys trouble with that one area.
I don't know. We'll see if Fares can get finishes, and I guess that remains to be seen.
Because for Jocko, the strikes look beautiful, right? Like, he can do everything you would ever want a striker to do. It's just there's not that crazy amount of power behind them. And for Ziem, again, I love the ability to mix his combinations in with his kicks. Again, his striking really is picture perfect, but he strikes a lot more like a Bisping than like a Vanderlei Silva, right? He's going to throw everything at its full potential and not just wing massive power hooks. But this might be a fight where winging some of those power shots to get your opponent's respect might actually help him open up the rest of his game.
And we'll see how it plays out for these two guys. If you look at it for Ziem in the UFC, lost to Don Madge, a close fight against Jamie Mullarkey, a close fight against Luigi Venturini, the win over Figlock. For Jai Herbert, the win over Kama Worthy, that one against Kyle Nelson, leg kicks played effect in that. The favorite in this matchup is the former Cage Warriors champion that went over Kane Carrizosa way back when. Jack Grant as well. We have a look at the topology vote. Surprise to us there to you. I didn't like Ziem's last time out going into it, and I liked him way more than I should coming out of it. So I have this like rose-colored glasses thing going on with myself, and I think the fans will. I'm going to say over under 65% Ziem.
I think it's going to be the other way. I think Herbert will be the favorite.
And it is the other way. 848 total votes, 67% Herbert, 70% by decision for the 33% that have Ziem, 75% by decision. So Herbert's the favorite. The fans have him to win. Who do you have?
I think Ziem has all the skills to go through and win a decision. I think the kicks are really going to be important for him. If he can go to the leg, go to the body enough to slow down some of the attack of a Jai Herbert, I think he does have at least a game plan to go out there and get the win. But I think the aggressiveness of Jai Herbert, this is what I'll say at least, Jai Herbert will be the one who decides whether or not he wins or loses this fight. If he walks into a big shot, it's his own fault, but guess what? If he's able to really pressure Ziem up against the cage and land his own combinations, I think it's going to give him the best chance to win. So for that reason, I'll pick Jai Herbert.
I like the varied striking attack and the fact that Ziem can pick to all three levels, and if you're not worried about the threat of the takedown, that just opens up the younger Ziem's game a little bit more. So for me, I've got the smile killer out of France, Fares Ziem, Matt going with the Black Country banger, Jai Herbert to get the win. Really, the next fight. Andrea Muniz taking on Paul Craig. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Name Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.
The number 9 ranked light heavyweight, Paul Craig out of Scotland, looking to drop down to middleweight for the first time in his career at age 35, taking on the number 14th ranked middleweight. It is Andrea Muniz. So when we look at a fight like this, Matt, for Paul Craig, bumps in the road, ups and downs, he has so many. 7 performance bonuses in the UFC, 6 submission wins in the light heavyweight division. That's tied. That is second of all time in that light heavyweight division. Only one below Glover Teixeira for the record at 205. But for Craig, he moves down to 185 and he takes on Muniz, just the arm snatcher. You saw him beat Bartosz Fabinski, cinching that choke. You saw him break Jacare Souza's arm, and that was just so tough. It was tough for me to even say. But for Muniz, last time out, the impromptu main event, it was supposed to be Krylov versus Span. It ends up Muniz versus Allen on the fight on the night. And Brendan Allen was able to strike on the outside, out-wrestle, out-grapple, and submit Andre Muniz. And Brendan Allen's done good things even since then. Now Muniz gets to try and stack the deck again. And he was on a tidy little win streak. He went from losing to Azamat Murzakanov on the regional scene to a giant win streak, 2 fights on Contender Series 2018-2019, a win over Antonio Arroyo in the UFC. That kind of threw like beer goggles version of Thiago Santos, and off to the races for Muniz. But when I look at a fight like this, I don't like guys at 35 moving down a weight class for the first time in their career, coming off a knockout loss. Go ahead.
What does Paul Craig gain from fighting at 185? What about his skill set gets better is my question, because a lot of times when guys either move up or down in weight class, let's say move up in weight class, you're going to have a big speed advantage over your opponents now, or you move down in weight, Cody Garbrandt, Kai France, didn't work out, but you get the idea. You're supposed to have a power advantage. For Paul Craig, his BJJ is the thing that got him to the dance, right? It makes him so lethal against everybody. Unless his wrestling gets so much better from these, I guess, 20 pounds less, I just don't know what Paul Craig's going to do all that different at middleweight they did at 205.
Yeah, this is what I struggle with. We had a fighter who had the similar skill sets to Paul Craig, and I would argue at times was a better striker. Do this from 205 to 185. It didn't work, and then he moved back up to 205. It's Latvian-Canadian Misha Serkinov. And he moved down to 185, and he fought Krzysztof Jotko, and just went takedown, 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 and couldn't get anything going. And then he fought Wellington Turman, and he looked like he was going to finish him, and then all of a sudden, he ends up getting caught in a submission, and he loses. So, for me, with Serkinov, with Paul Craig, late in the career, moving down to 185, I don't necessarily love it. And for Craig, one of those performance bonuses, a win over Luis Enrique. If you look at it for Andre Muniz at a Tata fight team, third-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, who's in the corner? Who's training with him? Luis Enrique.
I have to bring this up. Do you think Paul Craig at the age of 35 walks around and says, I'm 6'1.5"?
6'3.5".
6'3.5", that's all. I don't think people after the age of 11 worry about half inches anymore. But for Paul Craig, that's really what this whole weight class
Stephen
comes down
Struve
to.
was always 6'11.5".
Because he didn't want to be classified as a 7-footer.
Exactly.
It's like Kevin Durant, okay? Paul Craig probably doesn't walk around and go, I'm 6'3.5", yeah? Like, that would just be insane. He's a pretty hard dude from Scotland. I don't think he's worried about half inches.
Who scares you more in a dimly lit alley walking down the way? Is it Andre Muniz or is it Paul Craig? It's Paul Craig for me,
odd thing
hands
is,
down.
I think both guys seem, like, Paul Craig seems like the nicest guy when he does interviews. He's just, like, pretty jolly about stuff. Again, I just keep on coming back to, how much better can Craig's jiu-jitsu wrestling look at 185? Because Paul Craig is one of these fighters. We talked about it a bit with Ketlen Vieira, right? The BJJ is so lethal, we understand. If he gets them down to the mat, the fight is basically over. But how good is the wrestling to get them down to the mat? Paul Craig's not Kevin Lee. He's definitely not, like, even Kevin Lee on the feet. So for Craig, that one area is so strong. I just always worry about, can he fill in the rest? Now, I liken him a lot to buddy who just fought Dan Hooker. I can't remember. I'm forgetting the name.
Jalen Turner?
No. The fight before that where he pulled guard the whole time.
Claudio Poyes.
Claudio Poyes and Paul Craig are very much in the same camp. To where, yes, what they do might not always look aesthetically pleasing. You might look at their losses and think, wow, this is the worst fighter in the UFC. But you can't let that overshadow the strengths they do bring in. And for Paul Craig, I'm going to throw you under the bus a bit. I feel like he picked up against Paul Craig for a while in a lot of his fights. But Paul Craig's one of those guys who, if he just for 1 second, he can lose every minute of every single round. If he gets the fight to where he wants it for that 1 second, it's over. It doesn't matter how good you are.
Because he did it one time against Magomed Ankalaev, and now it's a forever thing.
I think his jiu-jitsu's that lethal, though.
Paul Craig, 0 of 15 on takedowns against Volkan Oezdemir, 330-27s. That fight was in London, so we'll see if Paul Craig can bounce back off those 2 losses. And for Muniz, if he can come back off that Brendan Allen loss. Because for Muniz, he'll throw leg kicks, he'll throw hammers to close the distance, to get his own takedowns. He is a good wrestler in his own volition, but we'll see how it plays out. Matt, Muniz is favored. We have looked at the Topology votes. Surprised to us as they are to you. I'm going to say over-under. I don't think it's going to be close. I'm going to say over-under 70% Muniz.
I think it's going to be under, personally.
What the heck? You saw these. 840 total votes, 66% Muniz, 44% by decision, 33% by submission. For the 34% that have Craig, 74% by submission. So a lot of people seeing a submission in this one. I do think Andrea Muniz wins this at middleweight.
I think Andrea Muniz wins this at middleweight, but I will say this. Paul Craig swims in those exact same waters as Andrea Muniz does. Like, if Muniz gets him down 5 seconds into the game, it's not over like it is in a lot of matchups that you assume with Andrea Muniz. I do think Paul Craig's going to offer quite a bit off his back to make this fight really interesting, and hopefully we do get some fun scrambles, right? Like, I hope it's just not, okay, whoever gets the first takedown, they're going to be good enough to just stay on top. I think it is going to be an interesting matchup. We're going to get some good scrambles, but I agree with you. I've got
And
Muniz.
if Muniz throws the kick to the body, Paul, if you're listening, don't grab it, because those hammer fists against Johnny Walker just beat his face in. They were terrible. Matt, both of us going with Andrea Muniz to get the win in the matchup. Let us know you have down below in the comments section. Nathaniel Woods fighting Andre Fili. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Your 16th and 17th ranked featherweights, if they kept track of those things. Coming up this weekend, it's the prospect, change the nickname, Nathaniel Woods taking on Touchy Fili, Andre Fili. Matt, when we look at a fight like this, both these two guys victorious in their last bouts. And if you look at it for Nathaniel Wood, already a tidy 2-0 since moving up to 145. The former Cage Warriors champ is Nathaniel Wood. Now, both these guys, their last fights, their last wins, you think, hey, we're riding momentum. Those fights were back in September of last year. It was a knee injury to Nathaniel Wood. He posted it on his Instagram. Looked like he slipped in wrestling practice and cut just below his knee, so he was out of a scheduled bout against Lerone Murphy, who ended up fighting against Gabriel Santos. You can check out that Lerone Murphy fight against Culibao here on the channel. But for Wood, he moves it forward. That fight was due earlier this year. Andre Fili was due a fight earlier on this year, but kind of a freak eye injury that was really scary for Andre Fili. He gets emergency surgery, gets that one corrected, and now Fili gets back into a fight like this. And if you look at it for Fili's last time out, he wins a split decision over Bill Algeo. And I don't know what fight Chris Lee was watching, because he's the only one that scored it for Bill Algeo. But I thought Andre Fili convincingly won 2 rounds in that fight. So Fili, I mean, with the head kicks, he cuts Algeo early. Even by the 3rd round, even if Algeo wins the 3rd round, Algeo's face was a crimson mask, as they say. So for Andre Fili, great opportunity in this fight. Tricky from both stances. Really good with all parts and parcels of his game. He does have decent volume. Obviously, Wood's got him beat in that game. But if you look at Wood against Charles Jourdain, you could see a method of victory for him against Andre Fili.
Well, let's think about Nathaniel Wood. I liken his increase in weight up to 145 a little bit to Robert Whittaker going from 170 to 185. And I say it for this reason. It's helped him improve upon the one thing that was holding him back at 135. Nathaniel Wood, you're right. He does have great volume. He really is that in-your-face kind of fighter. But he'd be that for about 2 rounds. And then in that 3rd round, a lot of guys could start to, I'm not saying they beat him, but they would start to open that door and make the fight a lot more interesting. I think at 145, it allows Nathaniel Wood to fight in that manner for all 3 rounds, and that's going to be really important against a guy like Andre Fili, who we know for his lasting ability. And the thing about Fili that I've always liked is, I bring it up every video, and
he didn't have lasting ability against Joanderson Brito.
He didn't have, but Joanderson Brito hit him with a big shot early and finished him. There's not a lot you can do there. Fili's not a guy who's going to fight at such a high pace, though, in the 1st and 2nd round, that he won't be there in the 3rd round for himself. But the thing I want to bring up is, Fili's offensive wrestling isn't something that a lot of people give him credit for, but in a lot of his fights that he is able to go out there and win, he's getting his opponent's respect with that offensive wrestling. And for being at that kind of long range, not necessarily kick heavy striker, but being a guy who fights from so far away, you don't really expect that from his game, but he's been able to go out there and take down very high level wrestlers in the past, and I'll be curious to see if he uses that against a guy like Nathaniel Wood, who used the leg kick quite a bit, which I think is going to be a huge part of his game against Andre Fili, but also is that in your face kind of guy, and I think Fili with his takedown attempts and the kicks will at least be able to disrupt some of that rhythm from a guy like Nathaniel Wood.
A little over 2 1/3 takedowns per 15 minutes for Andre Fili in his UFC career. Couple of performance bonuses out there for him. One over Shimon Moraes and another one that he picked up over Gabriel Benitez, where he finished him. So some pretty good stuff for Fili. He's been around the UFC for a very long time. Team Alpha Male staple. It's like him, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendez, and
Cody
then, of course, the damage, Darren Elkins. No, because Cody Garbrandt.
I guess he left. But...
Yeah, Cody Garbrandt's been bouncing around. For Nathaniel Wood, you've seen him at a Great Britain top team. An awesome performance on short notice where he had John Castaneda enter the fray. Brendan Fitzgerald said enter the fray way too much yesterday.
That was a great fight against Casey Kenny.
It's in my head. The Casey Kenny fight was great, but Casey Kenny off with 2 losses. The Song Yadong loss. See you later. Hasn't fought in over 2 years. Matt, for Nathaniel Wood, again, you look at the volume numbers, 6.34 to 4.42 absorbed significant strikes per minute. For Andre Fili, 3.83 to 4.03. So it's a negative differential for Fili, overwhelmingly positive for Wood, albeit at 135 for the majority.
This is a question I want to pose to you, because we bring it up a lot when we talk about Mateusz Gamrot, right? He fought in a lot of pretty crazy fights in the regional scene. And I'm not saying it affects him all that much nowadays, but when he gets hit by big shots, we kind of know what the result is. Do you worry a little bit about Nathaniel Wood and the amount of crazy fights he had before he came to the UFC? Because he's been in the UFC for enough now. You bring up the prospect, now I should probably retire that nickname. He fought in some wild Cage Warriors fights before he ever made it to the UFC, and I always worry about whether or not those kind of chipped away at the durability before he ever made it to the big show.
I don't think it scares people. He's more than a 2-1 favorite in the matchup, and if we have a look at the fan vote on Topology, it would not surprise me.
Favorite.
Yeah, I'm going to say over under 77.5% Wood.
I assume it'll be in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 853 total votes, 91% Wood, 83% by decision for the 9% that have Fili, 60% by decision. And obviously Fili also fought Charles Jourdain. It was about 3 years ago. It was the one where they read out that it's a split and Charles puts his arms up like, what are you doing? But if you look at it for Fili, I'd say the more well-rounded fighter out of these two, but when it does come down to the strike and the volume, I favor the much, and you can see it right there. Like, he's at a massive 5-inch height advantage and a massive 5-inch reach advantage, and Fili uses those really well. You saw that out of the head kicks against a bigger guy in Bill Algeo for the division his last time out. I do like Wood's ability to get in and get out, so I will go with Wood in this matchup, but this is a tough one. It really is.
It is. I think the leg kicks are going to make Fili a much more stationary target as this fight does progress. Now, it's still a very dangerous fight for Nathaniel Wood, but it at least makes his opponent that much more available to be hit as this fight continues. This could be a sneaky fight of the night, though, without a doubt. Like, Andre Fili has been in there with some of the best fighters in the world. You probably remember the crazy Yair Rodriguez knockout he was able to score over Fili. He's fought Max Holloway, too. Like, Andre Fili has had an absurd level of competition throughout his UFC tenure. That's kind of why he's 22-9. It's nothing against his skill set. I just favor Nathaniel Wood in this fight.
Both of us going with the prospect Nathaniel Wood in the matchup. Next fight on the card, it's a co-main event. Molly McCann's fighting Yulia Stoliarenko, 1-5 in the UFC on that Zhumagulov. And let us know who you have down below in these matchups. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. UFC London is on the way this weekend, and I know folks are very excited about the marquee matchup. In the main event, it's Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. And if we look back last weekend, it was a big-time fight night, home versus Bueno Silva. The fans were not about it. The co-main event that was originally scheduled, some people said, lots of people said, worst co-main event ever if it was Albert Duraev and Jun Young Park. Coming up this weekend from London, Matt, I don't know who books these things, but let me tell you something. It's a little bit weird. It's like if you went to the convenience store and you decided,
if you have a big load again, I swear.
I'm hitting it hard. Give me some Barba Papa. Give me that Fago. We didn't take...
Are you trying to get diabetes?
We didn't take English in school, so Barba Papa. That's cotton candy in French. Matt, you know what? If you like going to the convenience store and going, hey,
no,
give me that Megaloads bar.
Nobody's ever gone anywhere since said. Now, I'm sure there's some people in some professions who have said, give me that mega load. Nobody who does what we do on the internet says, give me that mega load. I'm just going to get into this fight. You're right.
As weird as a pop of Fago and a little bit of mega load, coming up this weekend, McCann versus Stoliarenko.
How much do you think the UFC wants Molly McCann to win this fight, I guess is what I'm saying.
Easy answer. Megaloads.
That's my big problem about this fight. For Yulia Stoliarenko, we have seen her ability to get submissions off her back, right? She has a phenomenal armbar. She's a very active fighter from that position. And what a lot of people forget is, yes, Molly McCann is a boxer, but in a lot of her wins, she is going to go for some offensive takedowns and really use her pressure, not only for her striking, but for her wrestling's sake. So yes, that will give Yulia Stoliarenko opportunities to at least incorporate her submission game. But on the feet, I gotta be honest, I don't think Molly McCann is a Jessica Andrade. I don't even think she's a D. Gomes. I still think she's probably the more complete fighter on the feet than a Yulia Stoliarenko.
Yulia Stoliarenko fought Lethway before coming into the UFC, the Art of Nine Limbs.
How many headbutts do you ever see in the UFC?
She fought with Saiza. That's an organization that you saw Tabitha Ricci compete with in Japan before coming into the UFC. Stoliarenko then goes on to the Ultimate Fighter, season 28. She loses in the season of Penny Kanzad, who goes to the finale. Then Stoliarenko has a real UFC fight against Leah Letz and loses split decision. She goes back to the regional scene, builds herself back up, does Stoliarenko. has one of the craziest fights you're ever going to see in Invicta against Lisa Verzosa, wins the bantamweight title there. But the craziest part about it for Stoliarenko, we talk about this career reinvention, moving down to flyweight. And it's weird for her because she has featherweight and bantamweight experience. This is the first fight I could find on Stoliarenko's mark to go down to flyweight. So odd there for Stoliarenko in the UFC. I mentioned it in the open, or I mentioned it in the last video, 1-5. The Ana Santos fight gets held up against the cage. She's going to try and pull down Santos. It doesn't happen. The fight against Julia Avila, there's a lot of attempts for submissions. Avila is the one that ends up getting the submission
Alexis
win.
Davis,
against
right there.
Alexis Davis on the mat. You had 2 or 3 chances at the Gumby armbar, and Stoliarenko couldn't get it done. She does get it done against Jessica Rose Clark. Jessica, the mat is lava. Oh well. And then she gets submitted. And for Stoliarenko, her last time out against Yes, runs away from the fight, Chelsea Chandler. In that one, wonky striking from the two of them. Stoliarenko rocks Chandler. Stoliarenko gets the first takedown. That fight, a catchweight at 140. Chandler wins and gets ranked off of that win. Don't forget it. Then it was 2 more takedown attempts from Stoliarenko.
Bantamweight's as shallow as a kiddie pool right
and
now.
Chelsea Chandler ends up getting on top. She gets the finish. So now Stoliarenko down to 125, where Meatball Molly McCann, the boxing gets it done, the former Cage Warriors flyweight champ, but for Molly McCann, in the fights that she struggled with, Jillian Robertson, Tyla Santos, we're talking, and I know we're talking higher names, Laura Fritzen. Why did she leave the UFC off a Casey O'Neill loss? That's beyond me. She's over there with, and I quote, Immortal? That's who she's with now. She had a great fight. She had a fight of the night against Carol
Yeah,
Osa.
if you lose to like Song Yadong and Casey
Laura
O'Neill, you probably
Procopio.
shouldn't get cut immediately.
See you later. And so it is odd that way, but if you look at also the loss there in Blanchfield, we know where McCann struggles, and those are the waters that Stoliarenko swims in. The black belt in Jiu-Jitsu is Stoliarenko. Now, Molly McCann for this one, next gen Liverpool. Obviously, Jafel Filho in the undercard, some hard feelings because that's why Paddy Pimblett's, Makayev's not on this card. And for Pimblett, a tricky win his last time out. And he's no longer here, or he's not on this card. But what I want to say is McCann training with Shauna Bannon, who's on the undercard of this one. It's pretty cool to see there, but it really is, at the end of it, both of them can strike, both can get it done with the grappling, but it does feel like oil meets water.
It really does. Again, Molly McCann can go for those offensive takedowns. Wouldn't do it in this fight, though, at all. At all. Bo Bichette can't hit fastballs, but boy, can that guy hit off speed. So you just never throw him off speed. You just throw high and inside fastballs till the cows come home. For Yulia Stoliarenko, if her great X factor of her game is those offensive submissions off her back, why would you ever take her down to the mat? I still think Molly McCann on the feet, though, has enough of a game to go out there and win some rounds with her boxing, but this is a really difficult fight to predict because Stoliarenko can go out there and get a lot of finishes, especially with her submission ability, whereas McCann, yes, she has knockout wins in the UFC, but a lot of it is that steady kind of in-your-face boxing, like in Alexis Davis, and I'm glad you bring up that fight.
The best 10-7-1 you'll see in the UFC. The best 1-5 in the UFC, akin to Jalga Shimagula. Matt, Molly McCann's a giant favorite in the matchup. We have a look over on Topology. Surprised to us as they are to you. I'm going to say over under 90% McCann.
I think it'll be over.
It's exactly 892 total votes, 90% McCann, 29% by decision, 64% by knockout. That's rich. For the 10% that have Stoliarenko, 69% by submission. If Stoliarenko is going to win, she's going to submit Molly McCann. I don't see Stoliarenko winning a decision against Molly McCann. For Molly McCann, if she wins, I see it going to a decision over Stoliarenko, not by knockout.
I agree, and that's how I think this fight's going to go. I think her steadiness on the feet is going to be enough for her to go out there and win rounds. I worry about her if she is going to go for offensive takedowns because, again, McCann's someone who's striking will just kind of end her up in some of those positions because of how looping her shots can be. She'll just kind of end up shooting for takedowns up against the cage. Very difficult place to be fighting someone like Stoliarenko. But I do have Molly McCann in this matchup as Craig takes a sniff of pure sugar.
Give it a sniff.
Yeah, that's...
Barba papa, and it scared you to
You
say...
know some old man on TV saying diabetes because people are drinking those.
Je m'excuse, Matt. Both of us going with Meatball Molly McCann in the matchup. Main event, Tom Aspinall is taking on Marcin Tybura. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.
Finally time for the main event of the evening. UFC London, Tom Aspinall taking on Marcin Tybura. And when you look at a fight like this, I mean, for Aspinall, still ranked in the top 5. He's been away for a time or two. His last time out against Curtis Blades. A 1-2 from Blades, a back step from Aspinall. The knee, it blew out. torn MCL, torn meniscus, and a damaged ACL on the UFC.com profile. And Aspinall builds himself back up. Training with Mick Parkin, who's on this card. Training with the champ, Phil DeFries. The man is getting it done with KSW. And now taking on Marcin Tybura, a guy with 5-round experience as an M1 Global Heavyweight champ, but also 5-round experience in the UFC and a primarily kickboxing match against former champ Fabricio Verdum in 2017. Tybura on the losing end of that, 50-45, 50-45, 49-46. But for Tybura, he's beaten some of these heavyweights in the past. We saw him beat Greg Hardy recently. We saw him get wins in spots where people didn't think Tybura was going to get wins. We also saw Tybura lose in spots where you didn't maybe think Tybura was.
And that's always been the difficult thing about Marcin Tybura. He did get a pretty heavy push at one point. You bring up the main event he was able to have against Fabricio Verdum. That was a huge fight. And to Tybura's credit, we bring this up quite a bit. He is one of the few 5-round heavyweights, I would say. I don't think he's going to fight like some
Even though you've only seen it once in the UFC.
Exactly, but even in that 5th round, he landed a pretty clean head kick against Fabricio Verdum. I feel the need to bring up this 1 second of MMA that nobody ever is going to remember, because at least it shows that, A, how many heavyweights do we see throw head kicks? Basically none. And the fact that Tybura was able to do that in the 5th round, a very grueling fight where he's receiving a lot of takedown attempts and defending quite a lot of them, to be fair, I do think it shows the resolve that a Marcin Tybura does have. But the thing I go back to, and I brought this up quite a bit as his career has progressed, he has become a lot more of that wrestler, grappler type of a fighter than that kickboxer from distance. Not saying he doesn't have those skills in his repertoire, but at 37, I just think Marcin Tybura really realizes where his bread gets buttered, and that does have to do with the grappling and with his forward pressure. This is the last thing I'm going to say before I keep on pumping Marcin Tybura's tires. He's a lot slower than Tom Aspinall, Craig. Like a lot slower than Tom Aspinall. And that's what I have trouble with, because if Tybura's not able to close that distance and just get rid of all the oxygen, make speed not a factor in this fight, maybe he can get Tom Aspinall down to the mat. But something you brought up a lot in the past, and I 100% echo it. Tom Aspinall's really good at grappling. We just don't see it a lot because his boxing has reached such a level. I know with the Andre Arlovski fight, he was able to hurt him on the feet and then submit him. But for Aspinall, you do get carried away with how talented his boxing is. Kind of forget that he does have a ground game to go along with it.
I mean, listen, MMA math is what it is. Tybura looked just lifeless against Alexander Volkov, whereas Tom Aspinall knock him out, drag him out, submit Volkov in the 1st round. Performance bonuses against Collier, Arlovski, Spivak, and Volkov. And Tom Aspinall, that win over Spivak is going to age really well. The other thing about Spivak is it's kind of like Tybura light. Tybura's been, again, walk to run. Spivak fights the same way. But if you go back and watch that fight, it's not a fair comparison because from the jump, Spivak just doesn't look like himself, and Aspinall's walking him down, and then it's over, and it's done really quickly. So it is a credit to Aspinall, but Spivak didn't just really look like he was on his game that night. But if you look through it, for Aspinall, British Junior National Wrestling Champ, he had that amateur boxing experience. He was able to really get it done, a feature of the Tyson Fury camp to get ready for boxing. So maybe you'll see Aspinall getting Fury ready for Francis Ngannou.
I don't know if you ever watched this. BT Sports did this whole entire program where they had John Fury, Tyson Fury's dad, just driving around a double-decker bus, and they were just talking about Tyson Fury fights. Tom Aspinall and Molly McCann both made an appearance on that, and John Fury could not say enough great things about Tom Aspinall, not only as a person, but as a training partner for his son, Tyson Fury.
Well, you'd rather John Fury saying good things about you, because when he's saying bad things
he's a terrifying large man.
They're all over the internet. But when you look at Aspinall, again, he took a really long layoff in his pro career to teach BJJ at his dad's school, and if you see that, I have it as Aspinall BJJ is the gym for this one, but Aspinall with Parkin, that big body that's going to work a lot of the takedowns, and the same thing from Phil DeFries. Both guys from Sunderland fight just like that. So cool to see that for Aspinall, but you know how good the boxing can be. And against a guy like Tybura, you're going to get a lot more kicks out of Tybura. You're going to get a lot more to the body, to the head. And Tybura can wear out the best heavyweights that are out there. So if you look at Tybura, the 5 on in, it's 4-1 just like Aspinall. The win over Hardy, the win over Walt Harris. He beat Romanov by majority decision, got 10-8 in the 1st round. Round 2, round 3, rallied right back. And Tybura's last time out against Blagoy Ivanov, it was as if somebody took a nice timepiece and they just tried to wind it with their finger and went really slow. Because for Tybura's last time out against Ivanov, they fought at a snail's pace, and it happened to be Marcin Tybura came out with a win.
I gotta be honest, and feel free to disagree with me. I feel like Tom Aspinall, if all things are equal and the knee's not a big problem, just stylistically, in the top 15 is one of the more difficult matchups for a guy like Marcin Tybura. And I bring up the speed for a reason. Tybura is not a guy who's going to close that distance all that effectively. We brought it up about Yanal Ashmouz earlier on in the card about how, okay, we were kind of down on him making his debut, but the way he's able to close that distance really is able to help him show his strengths more than his weaknesses. For Tybura on the outside, I worry about when he closes the distance. If he's not able to get the respect from the kicking range, I don't think he can box with Tom Aspinall, if you want my honest opinion. I think the speed's really going to be an issue for him. So if he can't get it to the mat, which we all know Tom Aspinall's not Sub-Zero on the ground, and if he can't implement the kicks, I think it's going to be a difficult fight for Tybura.
And I mean, for Aspinall, you've seen really good fighters come back off of knee injuries. You've seen really good fighters' careers derailed by knee injuries. Kevin Lee is the
To be fair, though, Aspinall is only 30 years old and doesn't have a lot of miles on the odometer, so hopefully he can come back and all is equal. But you're right, it's a point that you have to bring up because it has been a very major injury. But luckily, like you said, it's not like he had to get his ACL reconstructed or anything.
Well, it tore his ACL and
No, he said it was
meniscus.
minor ACL. It was tore his meniscus.
Tore his MCL, tore his meniscus.
Yeah, so ACL's the thing I worry about a lot more than the MCL or the meniscus.
All right, Matt. Well, we threw this one out there to the fans at Fight Night Picks in the community tab. 1,000 have voted. 91% Aspinall. AK Man KA saying Aspinall is so talented, probably my favorite heavyweight. I think he finishes Tybura by KO within the first 3 rounds. Austin saying hopefully Tom hasn't lost a step and continues winning in dominant fashion. We also have Ryan saying Aspinall will turn Tybura into I don't kielbasa. And then we've got Crazy Pato saying Tybura beating Aspinall would be the upset of the year, IMO. To which I responded, there's...
But I'll say,
odds.
You
don't have to yell.
You can't just look at the odds, though, and say that's the biggest upset of the year.
Alexa Grasso beating Valentina Shevchenko is
That's a big upset, don't get me wrong. But this would be a massive upset if it happened. Like, if Marcin Tybura is able to go to Tom Aspinall's home country in his hometown and beat him, that's a pretty big deal. Like, people don't often do that in MMA. So for Aspinall, the one thing I will say, too, is Aspinall seems to genuinely have like a home crowd advantage. Not that it's some big deal or anything, but the UK fans get behind their fighters like few other regions do, which is always a lot of fun to watch. Like, I love these UK events for that reason. The fans get into it, and it does make it feel like that much bigger of an event. I'm so sick and tired of the Apex. We haven't really talked about this, but when they do go to these bigger avenues, or to these bigger venues, and you see the fans really do pull for the fighters that are from those areas, it makes it feel that much better.
They've been a little flat the last few, 286 and the fight
remember when Aspinall
that
fought Curtis Blades? Like, I know it ended within a minute and he hurt his knee, but like the pop that they were getting from the crowd over there was absolutely incredible.
Well, I do have Tom Aspinall in the matchup. That's probably not a surprise to many people. Mega load that one. But if you do look at it for Aspinall, the boxing speed, the hand speed, and the jiu-jitsu, that's why I have him. Now, for Tybura, you talk about bigger bodies in the gym to get ready for this one. Obviously, Carlos Ramola is going to be one of them. But Makhmud Muradov, to get ready for the boxing of a guy like Aspinall, that's the perfect guy to Vancos, and he's got that built into that camp. So for me, it is Aspinall, but it should be a really fun fight.
I've also got Aspinall in this fight, but my curiosity really comes down to who do they match him up with next? Because for Curtis Blades, that man wants a title shot so bad, I couldn't imagine him fighting Aspinall again. But heavyweight is starting to encounter a bit of a logjam, right? You've got John Jones in the picture, who's a really big name, so a lot of fighters who probably have more popularity than a great resume are going to get those opportunities. Sergey Pavlovich, of course, has looked absolutely phenomenal as of late.
Yeah.
So yeah, for a lot of these fighters at heavyweight, it does feel like, okay, I'm kind of one fight away. So for Aspinall, he's a huge opportunity this week.
Big opportunity for both these guys. Some notes from the editor, Matt. We checked it after the fact. That Megaloads expired on the 15th of January, 2022.
I feel fine.
And we ate them.
Until later, maybe.
Eating those Megaloads. Matt, some big-time fights on this card. 15 total. If anything changes throughout the week, I'm away. But I'll bring my stuff, and I'm sure I can be a little flexible depending on my wife on vacation. So we'll see how the vacation plays out that way. You've got some travel plans.
Yeah, I'm in Europe the week after that. I'm going to go check out. It's kind of wild. We didn't plan this at all, but London, they're fighting in London. Then I'm there the next week. So.
Yeah, and we'll figure out a way to get things done during the time. So we'll figure out a way to get that done because, I mean, you got Sandhagen coming up. That's a big-time main event that he has on his plate. And then the big pay-per-views are soon to follow. The BMF belt's on the line. Matt, I want the folks to just let us know what you think of the video. Toss a like out there. Make sure you comment with who you have in the margins. Question mark kicks this Saturday at some point on Saturday. Time, it varies, so that's a TBD, but a lot of big time things to look forward to. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.